big time.
That's the music we got in here, Tom.
I like that.
Is that not your normal music?
No, we've been using the same tired stuff that you guys use on Off the Bench.
Well, looks like I'm in here. We're changing things up.
Amen. I love it. That's got a better feel to it on a Monday morning. Just kind of grooving into the week.
Well, there we go.
And we welcome you to Dialed In. I'm Tom Brenneman, joined by Luke Brenneman from Indiana University here shortly. We've already introduced Jacob. Our show is presented by UDF and Encore Technologies. We come your way twice a week, Mondays at 9 on Chatterbox Sports. We post on the Believe Network later in the afternoon. Then Thursdays, we're coming at you at high noon on Thursdays to get you ready for the weekend. You can find us on YouTube, the Chatterbox Sports page. Download us anywhere, anytime. Just search Dialed In with Tom Brenneman and you're dialed in. You know, I don't know about you, but this one felt different to me. Yes, the Bengals have lost games this year. They could have won, should have won. They lost to teams they should have beaten, could have beaten. But in each of those, I felt like a rebound had a chance to occur. I really did. I'm not so sure anymore. This one felt different. They play 60 minutes in an NFL football game, and for the first 40 minutes, the Bengals and Eagles were tied at 20 apiece. I mean, the game was right there for the taking, right? Get back to 500. But over the final 20 minutes of the game, the Eagles scored 20 points. They scored on 5 straight possessions, 5 in a row. And they did it in overwhelming fashion. In fact, they bullied the Cincinnati Bengals. They did it on the ground. They did it in the air. They did it in toughness. And again, I don't know about you, but I feel like there are now legitimate questions about this team and about this franchise moving forward. Joe Burrow said after the game, hey, it's doable. We can win 7 of the last 9. Do you believe that? Do you think Joe Burrow believes that, watching what he's watching? I get why he says it. He's got to say it. What's he going to say? We stink and we're going to not make the playoffs or win any games? But, man, I'm having a hard time buying it. Luke Brenneman, your assessment on what we're watching right now with the Cincinnati Bengals after that humiliating defeat yesterday.
Well, I'll start with this because you brought up Joe Burrow and what he had to say. It feels like every time the Bengals have lost this year, which has been 5 times in 8 games, so it feels like it's every single week at this point. Excuse me. He has something to say about what's next. How are they going to win 7 of 9? You can't even put consecutive good offensive games together. They need to get back to square one right now and really run this thing all over again because nothing looks good in Cincinnati.
You know, you say get back to square one, and I mean, I'm with you. You got to kind of start all over. But, Jacob, I look at the talent level on the team. I mean, whether you're talking about the defense and the 5 straight scoring drives by the Eagles, you're talking about not sacking the quarterback one time. In fact, he was hit exactly one time in the game yesterday. Mm-hmm. I mean, to sit here and beat down the secondary, and I'm not suggesting for a second that they're any good, but it is physically impossible. And I've said this for years. The most important part of a defense in football is its pass rush. Because you can't ask, I don't care if it's Cam Taylor-Britt, I don't care if it's the best cornerback that ever lived. You give a quarterback 5 seconds, 6, 7 seconds to throw a football, you can't stay with these wide receivers and these athletes today. You can't do it.
You're right. You're 100% right. And that's why the pass rush has been such a major issue for the Bengals this year. It's Trey Hendrickson and nobody else. Other than Hendrickson, there were only 2 pressures from Bengals players this week. 1 hurry by B.J. Hill, 1 QB hit by Joseph Osai, 0 combined pressures on 54 pass rushes, Tom, for Sheldon Rankins, Sam Hubbard, Miles Murphy, McKinley Jackson, Chris Jenkins, and Lawrence Guy. That's not going to cut it.
No.
You could have all pros in your secondary, which the Bengals certainly do not, and that pass rush is still going to allow them to get carved up. I don't care who you're playing. And when you're playing a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, he's certainly towards the top level of quarterbacks in the league. He's going to tear you apart. But Jameis Winston would tear you apart with that kind of time in the pocket. It doesn't matter who you're playing against. This pass rush simply isn't good enough for a team that claims to be a championship contender. Obviously now, this far into the season, we know they're not. But coming into the season, we were told that this roster was ready to win a championship right now, and it clearly is not. That's not the case. We don't have the talent, and it seems like we have a poorly talented roster met with a not great coaching staff, which is a killer combination.
Luke, you and I were talking about this yesterday. Look, everybody around here gets on me for getting on Zack Taylor over the last couple of years, but I continue to say, and the evidence backs it up, this team keeps going after a fast ramp up, right? Burrow's hurt, comes back the next year, they go to the Super Bowl. The next year, they go to the AFC Championship game, so that's a step down. And please, in the chat, don't tell me about the Bengals are one of only 3 teams in the last 3 years to make 2 championship games. It's old news. It's old news. Last year, Burrow gets hurt. They don't make the playoffs. Here, Burrow is back and healthy. Full training camp, whole 9 yards, right? And the team is 3-5. I'm not blaming Burrow for the team being 3-5. Please don't misunderstand me. But do you look at Zack Taylor and say to yourself, and I use a term all the time, but I really mean this term. It's turned to almost a joke on our show. But a leader of men. I mean, do you look at this guy as being able to get this team bailed out after what you've seen so far this year? Luke Brenneman.
I think it's a nightmare
Luke,
situation.
you're muted.
Go ahead, Luke. Start from the beginning.
I think it's a nightmare situation for the Bengals because what I wanted to talk about on the first segment that you hit me in was this idea of Joe Burrow talking about how they have to win 7 of 9. I've really never heard a championship team look that far in advance. It feels like really good teams go week to week to week, and they're like, we're only worried about this next opponent. We're only worried. And all the Bengals want to do is look at the postseason. This Bengals team couldn't stop my Division V high school offense right now at any level of their defense. So to address the Zack Taylor question, I don't really know. I think that you can put a lot of blame on Zack Taylor for that Baltimore loss. I think you can put a lot of scrutiny on Zack Taylor for numerous things that have happened so far this season. But if Zack Taylor is in a position, along with this coaching staff, where on 3rd and 1, you said, hey, we're going to run the ball inside our own 40, and you didn't get it. A lot of teams don't get 3rd and 1 runs. That's a part of football. Defenses are going to make plays. But now you look at your play sheet and you say, now we have to go for it on 4th and 1, and the best thing you have is some weird, tricky play where you hit Jamar Chase in the flat after like a couple reverses, and Joe Burrow doesn't even look at anybody else, and next thing you know, the game was over, right, as they didn't convert that 4th down. That's one of those things where I kind of took a deep breath, and I'm like, I want to go on Twitter and bash Zack Taylor, which I did at the time, but now I'm taking a step back, and I'm like, if this team has proven to Zack Taylor through 8 weeks of the regular season in practice that they can't pick up a 4th and 1 on something besides some trickery play to Jamar Chase in the flat, then this team can't beat anybody. Because football games, especially NFL games, are won in the trenches, and the Bengals don't win in the trenches on the defensive line. They're not winning at any aspect offensively. Look at the last 3 Bengals games offensively. They have not shown up one time. This is an Eagles offense that had not scored a point in the first quarter this entire season. The ball was put in the offensive hands, and they said, hey, go out there and get us. Go put up 14. Go put up 21 by the end of the half and put us in a position to win. And then come the second half, they didn't even seem to be able to convert a first down. So I don't know why Joe Burrow is talking about 7 of 9. He should be talking about trying to go beat the Las Vegas Raiders next week, because the way they're going right now, they shouldn't be able to talk about beating anyone but themselves.
Yeah, you know, football is, when you get right down to it, and you just hit the nail on the head. Basically, football is made up of a lot of big, strong, tough guys, okay? But the other team has big, strong, tough guys too. Your job as an offensive lineman is, when you line up against the other team's big, strong guys, is you're going to be asked to win battles every snap. Now, we know it's impossible for every player to win every battle in every snap. That's just unreasonable to expect it to happen. But one of the one of the mainstays in this Zack Taylor offense has been its inability to convert on 3rd and 4th and short. I mean, you go back to the Super Bowl, right? They can't get a 3rd and 1. They can't get a 4th and 1. And everybody's blaming Mixon around here. All of a sudden, Mixon looks like Jim Brown because he's behind an offensive line that is saying, all right, our coach has made a play call where our job is to get 1 yard. 1 yard. We're not asking you for 5 seconds of pass protection here on this call. We're not doing that. And I got to be honest with you. I'm not going to beat down Taylor about going for it on 4th down. I hated the call on 4th down, but I think anybody who was watching that game knew that the Bengals defense was not going to stop Philadelphia the rest of the game. Now, to Taylor's credit, he said, look, when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it's on me. I made the decision. That is all on me. So he's never been afraid to do that. But he's starting to fall into the David Bell thing, where nobody on the team is ever at fault. Why can't he come out after a game and say, you know what? I know I made my mistakes here today. But is it unreasonable to believe that we can't ask people to go convert a 3rd down and 1?
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. That's definitely a fair complaint. But again, I go back to, and I hate to say that because they're NFL players, they should be able to convert 1-yard plays. But when your starting left tackle, Orlando Brown, is out, and on 3rd and 1, a must-convert situation, you decide to run an outside zone behind Cody Ford.
That's right, behind the left side of the line.
Come on.
That's right.
I know that's the play call if Orlando Brown's in, but you have to be smart enough as an offensive head coach to run that the other way. You have Alex Kappa and Amarius Mims on the other side of the line, far better than the Volson-Ford duo that you choose to run behind. And then I totally agree with you. I think at that point in the game, you do have to go for it. I was mad at the time. It was the 3rd quarter. It felt like an opportunity you have to punt the ball away and trust your defense. But why would we trust our defense at any point the remainder of this season? But the play call there, if you don't run it behind Cody Ford the first time, then you might get the 1st down. But after that, I understand that they might have just been scared to run the ball again. The offensive line was getting no push. And that's a product of drafting the least athletic offensive line in all of football. If you go back to the RAS score of all these guys coming out of the draft, the Bengals have the least athletic offensive line in football. They're fine in pass pro, but when you ask them to do anything with the defensive linemen lined up across from them, we don't have the athleticism in the trenches to get the job done. And that's a massive problem, and it's a problem that comes from way higher up than Zack Taylor. It's a draft strategy issue, and it's a guy who's been in charge of player personnel here since 1999, and it seems like there's been a lot of issues that have existed that whole time period.
I mean, you sit there and spot on, and you look at the same thing with the drafts on the other side of the ball. Mm-hmm. And look, we're getting into much bigger picture stuff here with the team and the organization. It's been well documented. They don't spend the money that other teams spend on scouting. Now, there have been times where the Bengals draft picks have been really, really good. Right? Later round stuff. So there have been some of that. But let's face it. The 3 best players on the team, let's say 4. The 3 best players on the team, you were able to get them when you got them and where you got them because you were terrible the season before. Burrow, Chase, Higgins, and the 4th guy, Hendrickson, you brought in as a free agent. Outside of that, your best offensive lineman, free agent. Now, the Mims kid might be a really good player. We'll see. Your next 2 offensive linemen, free agents, Kappa, Karras. And they're starting to look like it's time for a change. Rest of the defense, my Lord. I'm so tired of talking about Luke. I'm so tired of talking about, hey, this is a year for this guy or this guy or this guy. Now, I know Myles Murphy has been hurt, and I'm not just going to single him out. But he can't get anywhere near the quarterback. Nobody besides Hendrickson gets near the quarterback. How are they going to win any games with the scheme, the roster that they have right now?
I think that's a totally fair question. And if I had the answer, I would be the next head coach of the Bengals, and I would also work in their front office
Well,
because
maybe you
that's the
should
biggest
be.
issue here. I don't think that they've fielded a roster this season that is even a playoff roster. I watched this game on third. I watch every single game, and on third down and 12, on third down and 15, if we somehow get a team behind the chains, I'm biting my nails just hoping that this defense can get off the field and get Joe Burrow the football. And the biggest issue that I have is really good teams, not just really good defenses, but really good teams, they turn people over. And on third and 15, third and 20, as a confident Bengals fan, you're saying, hey, we might turn them over here. They might make a mistake here. They might do something dumb here. For us, we are not the aggressor ever. And it doesn't feel that way on offense either. It feels like there's a lot of dink and dunk going. I mean, that 12 or 11-minute drive was unbelievable. But at some point, you have to pair that with a quick drive. And the only time that the Bengals have really done that has been in 2 games this season. That's the Commanders and Ravens game. So for 75% of the year, both sides haven't clicked whatsoever. And in the Ravens game and the Commanders game, the defense was the worst it's been all year. So that brings us to 0% of the time the Bengals have played complimentary football, unless you want to count those 3 quarters in Kansas City. And now I'm starting to think the Chiefs just didn't play very good that day either. Because this is not a playoff football team, and it's so sad to think about. But if you don't have a pass rush, you're not going to beat anybody. If you have the secondary they have that can't turn anyone over, you're not going to beat anybody. So, heck, Joe Burrow, you can have a good game once in every 3 weeks and go out and throw for 4 touchdowns, but the defense is going to give up 5. On the Eagles' last 6 drives, they scored 4 touchdowns and 2 field goals. It's hard to play offense when you know that's happening on the other side of the ball.
I'm not going to beat down the secondary. I'm not, and I'm not suggesting for a second they're any good. I'm not. I listened to David Fulcher on WLW after the game yesterday. Of course, he was one of the great safeties in the history of the franchise. You can make an argument he's the best safety in the history of the franchise. Multiple Pro Bowls, all that kind of thing. And just an absolute animal when it came to putting a hat on people. But he made the comment after the game, he said, I would have killed to have been on the field on the touchdown pass that they throw straight down the middle, the 40 or 50-yard bomb that they hit. That, why am I drawing a blank on who was in coverage on that play? Help me.
I can't.
Help me. Who was on coverage on that play? That was, golly day. Somebody in the chat, come on and help me here. Anyway, he made the comment that Jordan Battle. Thank you, chat. Alex, James, Steve, Clayton, thank you. He said, I would have killed to have been the safety on that play. He said, because I'd have had my hands all on that ball and knocked it away, if not intercepted. Now, some might say, well, it's easy for Fulcher to say, he's been out of the game for 25 years. But look, the guy played the game, okay? He knows plays when he sees them. I mean, it was brutal. It was just right after you had gotten that touchdown to tie the game. And I mean, bang, hit the big. But again, did you see how much time this guy had waiting on that receiver to break down the middle of the field, 40, 50 yards down the field? That's why this one felt different. I said it in the monologue. I guess I still have a sliver of hope. Luke, you got a sliver of hope? You look at their schedule, you got to play the Ravens again, and we'll get to them in a minute. You got to play the Browns again with Jameis Winston at quarterback. Okay? Now, most of the time, you'd be jumping for joy on that. After watching yesterday, maybe you're not. Right? You got to play the Steelers twice. You've got the Dallas Cowboys. They stink, but you're playing them down in Dallas, and the Bengals stink. So, I mean, when Burrow's talking about winning 7 games, I'm kind of looking at that schedule last night, and I'm going, well, where are those 7 games? You have hope for that?
After losing the Eagles, I don't really know, because the Bengals were field goal favorites in that game. So if you're not winning games that you're, I guess, statistically favored in, then you certainly aren't winning 7 of 9, where you're arguably going to be an underdog in probably 4 to 5 of those games, depending on how they grade the Steelers with their new move as Russell Wilson progresses and develops as their quarterback 1. So I think there's like a sliver of hope just out of being a Cincinnati kid and a massive Bengals fan, but I really was thrown off for yet again now after the 8th game of the season, and you have 3 wins to talk about 7 of 9. I would have loved to say, hey, let's go beat the brakes off the Las Vegas Raiders, because nobody is not on the, like, nobody is on a different level than us right now when you look at the bottom tier of the NFL. I was scrolling through power rankings this morning. All these power rankings have the Bengals from anywhere from 18 to 22. I mean, that is bad.
Well, the only reason, you and I both know, the only reason they're 18 to 22 in anybody's mind is because of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. That's it.
And that's still not a good power ranking, is what my point is. That's argued that could be a bottom 10 team in the NFL.
Yep.
And this was a go year, a Super Bowl year, a all-in year. It looks like everyone's already folded their cards through the first 2 months of the NFL season. So I don't even know what to think, because the way they're playing right now, that Eagles game should have felt like a playoff game. I don't know if any of you guys caught the Bears-Commanders game, and obviously it ended in the crazy Hail Mary, but that was a gritty NFC in the trenches, 2 teams well above 500 football game, and neither of them looked particularly good, but to me it felt like a playoff game. Maybe it was just the 4 p.m. slate. It was getting dark. It looked a little chilly out east, but I wanted the Bengals game to feel like that, because it really was that type of game for both the Eagles and the Bengals. A struggling NFC team, a struggling AFC team, trying to live up to these expectations, and the Bengals were eventually the ones that completely collapsed come the second half.
You know, it's interesting you bring up those 2 teams, because when it comes to where should my team be, and maybe we're giving too much credit and have all year long to this roster. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we're the problem, thinking that it was supposed to be a good roster. 3 teams stand out to me, and I say to myself, what are they doing to win games? Okay, and I'm not going to get into why and how they are. You have the Chicago Bears that have been so bad for so long, it's insane. Okay, all of a sudden, they're having a pretty good year with a guy who just came out of college as their quarterback. The Washington Commanders, awful last year. All of a sudden, they're 6-2 with a rookie quarterback, right? And then the Denver Broncos, another team with a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, okay? They lost their first 2 games of the season, the Denver Broncos. Now, all of a sudden, they've ripped off 5 wins in their last 6 games. Now, you can say they're not playing anybody. They beat Tampa Bay. They beat the snot out of Tampa Bay. Granted, they have wins against the Jets and the Raiders and the Saints and the Panthers, but the bottom line is the Bengals are playing a dead last place schedule just like Denver is. The Bengals have Joe Burrow. The Broncos have Bo Nix. The Commanders are playing a dead last schedule. They have a rookie in Jaden Daniels. The Bengals have Joe Burrow. And again, I don't want anybody to misunderstand me that I'm blaming this on Burrow. This guy's playing his tail off, okay? He's playing his tail off. And if he had any semblance of a running game, like he even acknowledged after the game yesterday, if you cannot run the ball, the pressure on the offense, and this is a throw-first designed offense, you have no chance.
None.
How are those other teams winning, and this team's getting its brains kicked in?
2 out of those 3 teams, I would say they have elite defenses. The Broncos have a top 5 defense in the league. The Bears certainly top 10, working their way up, getting better as the season progresses. Matt Eberflus has been great on the defensive side of the ball there. But the Commanders is a really, I think, pertinent example to the Bengals, because they don't have much talent on the defensive secondary. Their D-line is very good, at least name value-wise, but these guys have fallen off a little bit as they've gotten older. There's not a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the ball for Daniels, and they're winning games, and they're doing it by scoring more in blowouts like they did when they came to Cincinnati, and in ugly games. I know it came down to a Hail Mary, but that game against the Bears yesterday is about as ugly as it comes, and they still get out of it with a win. That's just a team that is able to work around any hurdle that's put in front of them. And the one thing that I would point to with the Commanders is Cliff Kingsbury. I think they have a great play caller who is able to scheme their guys open. And I think that circles all the way back around to the Joe Mixon versus Chase Brown, Zach Moss conversation and the extend T. Higgins conversation. I think it's the same point for both of those. Mixon tearing it up in Houston while we struggle to run the ball here. Is it easy to say we'd rather have that production? Absolutely. Would Zack Taylor give Joe Mixon that many carries and that many opportune situations? No. We've seen it year after year. Mixon did not have those opportunities here. He fits the Texans system phenomenally. People talk about Kansas City when it comes to extending T. They don't have any elite weapons. Why do we have to extend 2? They have Andy Reid. He could scheme me open in the red zone. Zack Taylor can't do it. If he's going to be the head coach here, you need 2 elite weapons, an elite running back, and an elite quarterback. And what does that tell me? That tells me he's not a very good offensive coach.
Well, you sit here and you look at, Dan Horde brought it up on the radio yesterday, and I thought it was a really interesting point. The way he brought it up. Savvy broadcaster, man. Dan Horde's on his game. But he said, hey, look, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They're paying their quarterback $51 million a year. They have 2 wide receivers they're paying the big dough. 2 of them, right? So they have a team payroll designed, 2 huge stars at wide receiver, 1 star at quarterback. Now, are they a great team? They're not a great team. But I continue to go back to the fact that at the end of the day, through everybody screaming and yelling in Philadelphia about how bad they stink, and a lot of people compared the Bengals of the AFC to the Eagles of the NFC. Big expectations, haven't looked good, coach on the hot seat, at least in Philly. Every coach is on the hot seat in Philly. But Luke, the bottom line is, the Philadelphia Eagles, last time I checked, they're 5-2. How bad can they be?
That's the real parody of the entire NFL season is I think a lot of people had these expectations and preconceptions of who has to be good, who got paid, who needs to be good. And a lot of these teams that are on top in the upper tier of the NFL are surprising people. I feel like the Saints started 2-0, and everyone's like, are the Saints actually going to be good? And they became the most bet team to win the Super Bowl. They lose 5 in a row. The Bengals, on the other hand, they're not turning the corner. They're not turning up. They're not playing like the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think it comes down to the process aspect of the whole thing. Because Cliff Kingsbury is a total process guy. In Arizona, it didn't work out for him, but it was kind of weird because the Cardinals, when they were that bad, they would randomly go and beat the San Francisco 49ers. And they'd go beat a good team and show like a glimpse of how good they can really be in like that Kyler Murray speed offense that Cliff wanted to run his whole career. And if you look at who's really good right now, look at these head coaches. It took Dan Campbell a lot of time with his process. Cliff Kingsbury is already throwing in a process in Washington. How about Matt Eberflus? How many people were calling for his job just last year? And the process is starting to work. I mean, they're 4-3, but should be 5-2 right now. And then the biggest one of them all, I think, you have to look at Dan Campbell. They're the best team in the NFL, but I still think that what Matt LaFleur is doing in Green Bay is still a process at the end of the day. He knew they could get rid of Aaron Rodgers. He knew they had this future in Jordan Love. And the Bengals, as everyone else has progressed, the Bengals have regressed because they got content with making AFC championship games, with going to the Super Bowl, and they have not brought in the right pieces. They have not spent the right money, and they got content because they play content on Sundays too.
They sure do. That's a great point.
I firmly believe that this offseason, the Bengals front office and coaching staff sat there and looked at the roster and said, a healthy Joe Burrow is going to fix all of our problems. We don't have to address anything. If 9 plays 17 games, we are going to be just fine. And we are figuring out very, very fast that that is not the case. He needs help. He needs a defense. He needs weapons around him, at least in this offensive system, to succeed. He's playing great football. If this team's 500, he's probably...
I'm not going to go great. He's playing very,
He's probably
very
the MVP favorite if this team's 500.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And
That's fair.
2 of those games I can blame solely on the defense. So
for sure.
I'm just saying he's right there playing the level of football that he needs to play for this team to win a Super Bowl.
Yes.
And it's not happening around him in the other 21 positions. And that's where the frustration really lies for most of us because we're burning through the prime of Joe Burrow's career without really having anything to show for it? Are we really going to hang our hats in 5 years on a Super Bowl appearance, an AFC championship loss? Is that really what we're going to come out of this with?
That's a very good question because, like I said, and I don't want to repeat myself over and over, but this game felt different. You agree with that, Luke? It felt different?
Well, I think it felt different because we kept standing and we made it to the 8th round of the fight, and I think we just got knocked out. And we'll see. I mean, I think we just got knocked down. I think we had taken a couple right hooks, a couple uppercuts that were unexpected in the early rounds, but now we're officially down. This team is down. So if you get back up is one thing. You can get back up and get back to 500. But it's if you can get back up and win the fight. And what I mean by win the fight is make the postseason. I got to run here because I have to head to class. But That's what it comes down to it. And I just want to see more toughness out of this team. The one thing that was the driving factor about the defense, because Joe Burrow and Jamar got all the, hype, video, cameras on them all the time with their outfits when we were winning football games and whatnot. The defense was just a gritty group when we could go into Arrowhead and call it Burrowhead. But really it was to the defensive's credit. And they knew that too. They were like, nobody talks about us. Nobody wants to give us any love. We'll rush 3 guys and run this weird Lou Anarumo scheme, and we're going to stop people. And it feels like, I don't know if they don't have Jesse Bates anymore. Maybe it's Eli Apple and his energy. I'm not blaming it on not having a couple guys, but it feels like the toughness aspect of the Cincinnati Bengals is gone. And to Jacob's point, there's something there, in my opinion, about just clinging on to King Joe and saying, hey, it's going to all be okay. Look at the best teams in the NFL. C.J. Stroud has 3 damn good receivers around him. He has a really good running back. And their defense, nobody talks about. It's not that bad either. So to win at the highest level in the National Football League, you need a whole lot more than just a $500 million man in Joe Burrow. I mean, or a $50 million a year guy in Joe Burrow. But you get the point.
I know. You're right. All right, head on up to class. Indiana football still rolling. We got to get Curtis Rourke back. We got to get him back.
Oh, okay. I'll come back and talk about Indiana football for a second. But, yeah, no, he has to come back. They go to East Lansing this week. I'll go with them, actually. But they got another win. College game day came. That was kind of the first time I had heard letdown spot, no starting quarterback. But the fact that Indiana's 8-0 in football is probably the biggest parody in the world, and I feel like I'm living in a fever dream is what I told you last night. But It really is real, and if you stack them up to some of the best teams in college football, it could get really real really fast in Bloomington because now they're about a 70% chance to make the college football playoff, and I'm dying to see what that spread's going to be at the Horseshoe against Ohio State. Because who would have thought at this time last year that in 1 year from now, Indiana would be going to the Horseshoe potentially undefeated? That could be the game of the year. That could be like number 4 versus number 7 at that point in the season. But there's still a couple weeks to go before we get there. They have Michigan State this week, and their starting quarterback still beat up. But all right. I got to bounce. Thank you, guys.
See you, man. See you. All right, love you. I'll talk to you soon. Yeah, I mean, we drifted into the thing, and I got to bring that up because he just told me. I mean, he said, and you were down in Alabama where you got spoiled with this stuff.
That's right.
What's going on with Indiana is just unbelievable.
It's crazy.
It really is unbelievable. And hey, lucky for him to be right there in the middle of it all because this time next year they might be 4-4.
Well, at this rate, with the way college football is going, I'm not sure how long they're going to have Cignetti. If he keeps winning like this, I mean, how patient are programs going to be in a 12-team playoff? Well, but Indiana's a school that, Big Ten school, they can pay him. Absolutely.
They can pay him.
Absolutely. But I think there's a team in Columbus whose coach might be on the hot seat.
Well,
and if Cignetti goes in there and gets a win in a couple weeks, he might just stay.
Well, we're gonna get to that in a little bit. Want to touch on a couple of other things around the division for the Bengals. Jameis Winston, brought him up earlier. I've said on this show before that there was something about Winston that I always felt like, and I don't know what it was, but it was on some bad teams in Tampa too, to be fair. But I always felt like, maybe in the right situation, and I'm not going to say one game means he's in the right situation. I'm not. But, man, did he look good yesterday. 334 yards, 3 touchdowns in his first start as a Cleveland Brown. And they shellacked Baltimore 29-24. What in the world do you think they're thinking in Cleveland? I mean, you've had Deshaun Watson, right, the whole year at quarterback. And now you've got this guy, and look what they do against a good Baltimore team.
Yeah, I think if you're a Browns fan, you got to be pretty upset and thinking about where could this team be if we would have just started Jameis in week 1. I think everyone kind of knew that that was a question coming into the season. I mean, we saw how much of a step that offense took last year when they went from Watson to Flacco, obviously forced at that point. This change forced as well. Who knows if they would have made the decision to bench him if he hadn't gotten hurt. But Jameis Winston, clearly the better quarterback. That team clearly playing a little harder, playing a little better with him out there and with less talent. Deshaun Watson went 1-5 with Amari Cooper out there. And Jameis Winston goes out there with Cedric Tillman, throws him 2 touchdowns over 100 yards. Just great production. Justin Kenner, the host of Off the Bench, coming up here in a couple minutes, made fun of Elliott for suggesting that maybe these guys in Cleveland just weren't playing very hard for Deshaun out there. He said that was a crazy take. And then we see Jameis come in week 1. Week 1 is the starter in Cleveland, and they all seem to step it up, every single player in all 3 phases. I think vibes in the locker room mean more than we want to admit in the NFL.
No doubt about it.
And to go from Deshaun Watson, who is bottom of the barrel vibes guy, to Jameis Winston, who might be the best in the entire league in terms of just cheering people up and getting everyone ready to go in the locker room. I mean, what does it tell you about a starting quarterback or a quarterback room in general if before the game, the backup is the one doing the speeches in the locker room? When Deshaun Watson was starting, all the pregame clips were still Jameis hyping the team up before the game. Yeah. I think it means something that he's now the one leading that offense, and I think the guys want to play for him and want to win for him.
I couldn't agree with you more. Vibe has a lot to do. And a vibe at the end of the day going to win you a game? No. But it might make a difference in a handful of plays. And guys having your back. You still got to have a talent. Because I think everybody in that locker room has Burrow's back.
Yeah.
And they just got guys that can't make the plays. Meanwhile, the Steelers, they play tonight against the Giants. And believe it or not, through 2 different starting quarterbacks now, the Steelers are in first place in the AFC North. They win tonight. They have a 1-game lead over Baltimore. Wow. College football, UC falls to Colorado 34-23. 2-way star Travis Hunter. Oh, my Lord. He hauls in 9 passes for 153 yards and 2 touchdowns. I tell you what, and I really mean this, and Genty is having a phenomenal year at Boise. But if the Heisman Trophy is supposed to be for the best player in college football, there should not be a single vote for anybody else except for Travis Hunter for the Heisman. I really mean that. And it's nothing against the kid from Boise. It's nothing against the quarterback at Oregon. It's nothing against anybody anywhere. There are a lot of them having great years. This cat is playing over 100 and something snaps per game. NFL scouts are trying to decide, do we want to draft him in the first round as a wide receiver, or do we want to draft him in the first round as a cornerback? How in the world can anybody else be the Heisman Trophy winner?
I think it's very much a 2-horse race. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as you and say that it has to go to Hunter. I think if it goes to anyone other than those 2 players, it's a massive mistake by the Heisman Committee, and it's turned into a quarterback award, which we already know it kind of has. But with the season these 2 guys are having, Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty are the only 2 that should be in the Heisman conversation. Dylan Gabriel being up there at this point, that's strictly win-loss. That's right. The only reason he's up there.
His numbers aren't overwhelming.
No, but he's now the 2nd career-leading passer in yards and touchdowns in NCAA history. So his career numbers can kind of add to the storyline, and we all know the Heisman is about storylines.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say, everyone points to Travis Hunter and says it's the most unique thing we've ever seen, and to a degree that's true. In this era of football, we haven't seen a 2-way player.
Not even close.
But we've seen a 2-way player win the Heisman more recently than we've seen a running back put up the numbers Jeanty's putting up.
The last running back to win the Heisman, I believe, was Derrick Henry.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's 100,000 years ago.
Yeah, 2015.
Right.
Crazy. 9 years.
Yeah. I mean, he's the last one. And the kid, in a normal year, the kid in Boise should be the winner.
Yeah.
He should be. And his team's going to go to the college football playoff. And Dylan Gabriel has been outstanding. There's no doubt about that. We talked about this before. Ohio State gave them that game out there. Ohio State loses by 1. They fumble twice. They give them 10 points. Ohio State should have won that game by 10 points. Now, we shift gears to Ohio State. It's the biggest game of the season in the Big Ten. The Ohio State-Oregon game was a couple weeks ago, and now where we are moving forward. Okay? It's going to be this weekend Ohio State ranked number 4 against Penn State ranked number 3. Ohio State's running game was non-existent against Nebraska, a team that gave up 56 points the week before to Indiana. And Ohio State's running game, and they have the best running back room in the country in Judkins and Travion Henderson. Now, to be fair, their left tackle's out for the season. He got hurt in the Oregon game. They bring in someone else to replace him, and he gets hurt, has to be carted off the field. I got to tell you, I love the quarterback. I think Will Howard's a national championship quarterback. There's no doubt in my mind. He can throw it. He played well the other day. 3 touchdowns. He's a national championship quarterback. The wide receiver room, one of the top 2 or 3 in the country, maybe number 1. Defense exposed against Oregon, but they were fantastic against Nebraska. Fantastic against Nebraska. But we'll find out this week. Penn State won over the weekend. Didn't look particularly good, but that's not an easy place to win in Wisconsin. And their starting quarterback, Drew Aller, got hurt in that game. And we don't know if he's going to be able to play this weekend. The backup kid can run, man. I don't know how well he can pass, but he can run. Really run. I tell you, and I said this last night, I believe this is the biggest game in Ryan Day's career, this game. Because there's a legitimate chance that if they lose, Ohio State, with this NIL, everybody comes back, spending $1 gazillion on the team. If Ohio State would lose for a second time, do I still believe they're one of the top 12 teams in the country? I do. I think everybody would agree with that. But that doesn't mean they're getting in the playoff.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it at all. And I think this is a game Ryan Day has to win. Now, the only other time that I've ever said that, and I've never said it even before the Michigan game last year, the only time I've ever said that is after they get drilled by Michigan 2 years ago. They get in the college football playoff, and they're going to play Georgia. Right?
Yeah.
And everybody said,
don't have a chance.
No chance. And they showed up to play. Mm-hmm. That was one of the great college football games of all time.
Absolutely.
Total shootout. Stroud was great. Game was great. Were it not for a cheap shot in the end zone on Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe they win the game.
And look, if that's targeting on Arvell Reese over the weekend, then how is that not on Marvin?
Right. So this is... And it's brought up in the chat. No Name says he's got to beat Michigan, talking about Ryan Day. Yeah, he does. But that game might not mean anything if they lose this weekend. Because if they lose this weekend, real good chance they're not playing in the Big Ten championship game. Real good chance. Because you still would have undefeated teams in Oregon, Indiana, and Penn State. And Ohio State would have 2 losses both in the conference. So they would be eliminated from playing in the Big Ten title game. I don't know if you feel this way about Day. I really do. I think this is a huge game for him in that program.
Absolutely massive, and the only reason I wouldn't say it's the most important game of his career is because I think there's one coming up around the corner against Indiana that's just a little bit more important because it's at home. I think protecting the shoe is crucial for Ryan Day this year, and that comes down to Indiana and Michigan at the end of the season because he's already – we've already seen teams walk in there and beat him in the home stadium, which we haven't seen a lot with other coaches.
Yep.
So defending home turf is really crucial, but going to Happy Valley and winning this game this weekend would do a lot for the Ryan Day narrative. I mean, after the Oregon game, how many times did we see that 1-7 record against highly ranked teams, top 5 teams? That's something that he can change at least a little bit this week. I know that after the game, if Ohio State does win, the whole narrative is going to be, Penn State's not that good. They're just ranked 3 because they haven't played anyone. He still hasn't beat a real contender, and that's fine. Let's just win the game and then deal with that later. This is a massive game because we know how the narrative is if he loses it. If Ohio State drops this game, Ryan Day isn't even sitting on a seat anymore. He's sitting on ash.
There's no doubt about it.
So it is an absolutely crucial game for Day, and it's a crucial game for the Ryan Day supporters crowd, which I am not necessarily a part of, who said going into the season, every year we just sleepwalk to 10 wins with Ryan Day. The 12-team playoff's going to be great for us. What if we don't this year? With a $20 million NIL roster, some of the most talent I've ever seen in Columbus in 1 year, and a coach who's supposed to be a top 3 to 5 coach in all of college football, if you can't make a 12-team playoff this year, we need to have some serious conversations. And I have not been a guy that has been on the Fire Ryan Day campaign, but after that Oregon loss, the way it transpired felt like a lot of coaching errors there at the end of the game, poor clock management. If we continue that the rest of this season, I mean, the Nebraska game, how much of that is coaching in that game? It seems like you had 2 weeks to get ready for an opponent, and you didn't. I don't know what else there is other than looking ahead to Penn State, which certainly seems like what they were doing, or at least I hope that's what they were doing.
I think the Nebraska thing was an outlier because Nebraska before the Indiana game was a top 10 scoring defense in the country. Yeah. They were top 10. And then, I mean, everything that could have gone wrong for them, it did go wrong, and give Indiana the credit for that. I mean, my Lord, Indiana looked like the best team in the country for that one game. Yeah. And their starting quarterback, Curtis Rourke, went out with an injury when he split his thumb open, colliding with a helmet on the follow-through of a pass. They look like the best team in the country in any single game that I've seen any single team play this year. They did.
Yeah.
And so, Mark Fetters points out day 1-7 against top 5 teams. 1-7. He has not lost to any other team in the Big Ten in his career except for Michigan. That is staggering to think of. People saying he would be on the hot seat, including me, but he would be. And I haven't been part of the Fire Ryan Day crowd. Someone mentioned here about Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly knows exactly what he's doing. They've looked great against everybody else. Chip Kelly might be the best play caller in college football for a long time. I mean, he led UCLA last year to 8 or 9 wins? I mean, are you kidding me? With that team? And that conference, Pac-12 last year, was pretty doggone good. But you got to have, and one area where they've lacked is the offensive line, and recruiting-wise, and now the depth is starting to show up.
You're bumping your All-American level guard out to tackle now as you go in deep into conference play. Certainly not where you want to be.
No.
At Ohio State, the Ohio State University, we have tackle depth problems?
Yep.
Are you serious?
Yep.
How is this not a recruiting issue at this point? You look at this roster.
Well, it is a recruiting issue.
Well, right. But I don't feel like people are talking about that enough. Whenever you talk about Ryan Day, people always give him the benefit of the doubt recruiting. He dominates the skill positions. He's great at the skill positions. He has not done a good job recruiting this offensive line in his time there. We have had problems after problems with injuries after injuries and no answers to fill in those slots.
Yep.
Now that Michalski's out, Donovan Jackson's playing guard and Luke Montgomery's in it, or Donovan Jackson's playing tackle, Luke Montgomery's in at guard because we don't have another tackle. Carson Hinsman's the only other backup lineman that's worth a damn to throw in there, and he's also a guard center. I don't know how they've gotten to this point with just 2 injuries to tackle. You had to have a better plan than this.
Now, this Penn State thing with Aller, they're already talking about him. If he's able to play, he's going to be limited in what he can do. He was held out. He wasn't held out in the second half as a precaution. I mean, it was a 10-7 game, right? This guy was hurt, legitimately injured, all right? And Bo, how do you pronounce it? Pribula? Backup comes in, and like I said, the one thing he can do is run. But the big question is, can he make plays in the passing game? He didn't have to against Wisconsin. He ran around a lot. And, at the end of the day, say whatever you want. I think this is equally as big, almost as big, for James Franklin at Penn State. No other team in college football over the last 5 years has been hurt more by a 4-team playoff rather than a 12-team playoff than Penn State. In each of the last 5 years, they finished in the final rankings in the top 12 in the country. But they were losing to either Ohio State or Michigan and not playing in the Big Ten championship game. Now, different animal. This is a huge game. I mean, it's just not because I'm an Ohio State fan. It's a huge game this weekend. All right. Couple of other things to get to. The World Series. You been watching?
Yeah, for sure.
You have been?
Yeah.
Okay, now game 2
I said I wasn't going to. Before the World Series,
Why did you say you weren't going to?
Because I hate the Dodgers and I hate the Yankees. And I was like, I'm not going to watch this World Series at a protest for $300 million rosters. But I lied because I love sports and I'm going to watch the World Series.
Okay. All right. So you're all in.
I am.
Okay. All right.
Game 1 was
and
incredible.
I guess, the end of game 1, obviously we know what happened.
Yeah.
Walk-off grand slam, Freddie Freeman. I mean, it doesn't get any more exciting than that.
Right.
You know? And, you know, now 2-0. They go to the Bronx. And that place, I've been to the Bronx for World Series games. Unfair to compare my experience for World Series games because when I was there, it was a month and a half after 9/11. That's a long time ago. And so the energy in that place that particular night in 2001, the World Series, will never be matched. And that was the old Yankee Stadium now, but the place is going to be jumping tonight. There's no doubt about it. Walker Buehler has been fantastic down the stretch when the Dodgers decimated across the board in their starting rotation for the entire year. And yet here they are, up 2-0 in the World Series Game 3 tonight. I asked you, because I was gone over the weekend, doesn't mean I didn't have the ability to look it up, but I didn't, about FC Cincinnati. And I asked you, I said, hey, how did they do in their playoff games this weekend?
Yeah.
You said, I have no idea.
No.
Well, you shouldn't because they didn't play.
Well, there we go. Get off.
They play starting tonight. And you know that TQL Stadium's going to be rocking. That'll be a sellout, no doubt. Weather's going to be phenomenal. If you're going, though, dress warmly. It's chilly. And will be when the sun goes down tonight. They're playing New York FC. FC Cincinnati is the number 3 seed. FC New York FC is the number 6 seed. But the teams come in very different if you're talking about momentum. New York has been rolling. They lost in penalty kicks over the weekend. I think it was to Columbus in their last game of the regular season, but they've been rolling. And we know that FC Cincinnati has not. They won their final regular season game, but they've stumbled along here over the second half of the season. But they go at it starting tonight, and that will be jumping. Okay, we got about 8 minutes left. Is there anything on your mind you'd like to talk about? Anything that happened in the NFL, college football, anything on your mind that happened?
Do you think Jaden Daniels can win this MVP? Because it's becoming a little bit more real.
Who would you consider to be his top competition?
That's what I mean. Are we sure he's not the favorite right now? Who's doing more with less and surprising a team more than the Washington Commanders right now? If they're able to win the NFC East and be a top 2 seed in the NFC going into the playoffs, the only reason C.J. Stroud didn't win the MVP last year, if we want to be serious about it, is because he's a rookie.
Yeah.
And the people held that over his head and said, you can't give it to a rookie. Josh Allen's certainly his best competition right now. He's been protecting the football and scoring a lot of touchdowns this year. And the Bills are very, very good. I think if the Bills are able to win the AFC East running away, they'll probably give it to Josh Allen again because Jaden Daniels is a rookie.
Yeah.
But what do you need other than just stats in order to win the MVP in the
you're
NFL?
Right.
You need
you gotta win
moments,
games. You
and
said
you
it.
need moments.
You do.
He got a big-time moment against the Bears and against the number 1 pick in his same draft this weekend. He had that run in the beginning of the season where he didn't throw an incomplete pass.
Yep.
I think he has the stuff on his resume that might lead us to the first rookie MVP in a long time.
We might. We still got a long way to go. So let's, you and I, and we'll put up Luke's too, before we get out of here today, our Power 5 rankings in the NFL. We do this every Monday. And I took a lot of heat last week for who I had number 1 and who I had number 2. That hasn't changed. But let's start with your Power 5.
Start with mine?
Can you do that?
All right. Starting with my top 5, and I think at this point in the NFL season, everyone's going to have the same number 1. There's no team better than the Detroit
Well, that's
Lions.
who I had last week, and I got laughed at in the chat.
Well, you're sharp, Tom.
No,
You're
I'm
sharp.
not sharp, but that's who I had. They're the best team right now.
That's right. They are. They certainly are. They scored the most points with the least amount of yards since 2008. It's a massive outlier in the NFL this last game for the Lions, and they look dominant on both sides of the ball. Defense looks fine without Aiden Hutchinson. Certainly some questions there, but I expect them to address the edge rusher issue as we near the deadline. Chiefs at 2 because they keep on winning. And until they lose, they're going to have to stay there. So it's annoying. They're not playing great football. Mahomes keeps turning the ball over, but as long as they're undefeated, they're going to be up there. Commanders at 3, just because I think Jaden's playing on a different level right now. I think that team's really special. And we talk about their lack of weapons, but Terry McLaurin, man, he's a special player. He's a really, really good wide receiver for them, putting up great numbers. And I think they're a legitimate team here in the Super Bowl hunt, and I have them at 3. Bills at 4, because as we talked about in the MVP conversation, Josh Allen's protecting the football and playing at a really, really high level. And I'm going to rely on quarterbacks, and that's the same reason I have the Houston Texans at 5. If I have to bet on someone right now in a compact AFC, I'm going to take C.J. Stroud and the Texans because I think he's a really, really special player. That's my top 5. 3 AFC, 2 NFC, which is kind of funny considering I think the NFC is much better than the AFC right now.
Yeah. And you wouldn't have thought that at the beginning of the year. All right, here's let's put up Luke's top 5. I wish I'd have had him here when we did this. But he goes to Lions, Chiefs, Bills. He has Green Bay in there. And even after losing yesterday, he still has Baltimore in there. Okay, let's go to mine. I had the Lions first last week, and you guys laughed at me. Kansas City, they just find a way to win. End of story. Buffalo looks different this year. And I just find that stuff so interesting when you let a star player or players leave. Now, we'll see as the season goes on. Because we've seen in the past, and that's all you can go by, that Allen will give it away in big moments. But so far, as Jake just said, he's not this year. I got the Texans 4. Flip a coin for me, the Commanders and the Eagles. I think if it's a big game, I think the Eagles would beat the Commanders. I really do. But you know what? You look at. I mean, did anybody see the stat line on Jared Goff yesterday? Now, think about this. Now, I know there were a lot of turnovers in the game. Okay, a couple of interceptions by Tennessee's quarterback yesterday, Mason Rudolph. The Detroit Lions scored 52 points yesterday and threw for 85 yards. The stat line on their quarterback, Jared Goff, was 12 of 15 for 85 yards. Oh, and by the way, 3 touchdowns of his 12 completions. Could you ever imagine the Cincinnati Bengals winning a game where they throw for 85 yards?
Absolutely not, Tom. Absolutely
I
not.
mean, zero chance.
Zero chance.
Right.
No shot. And that's the frustrating thing is because I think everyone would say we have a quarterback that's much better than Jared Goff, and I guess that's why we don't think you're going to throw for 85 yards a whole lot. But time and time again, we see teams around the league be able to overcome when the normal way they win doesn't work and still win games in dominant fashion like the Lions did this week. If the Bengals don't have everything working at 100%, they can't get it done. And I think that is a reflection of the coaching staff and the scheme more than anything at this point because what else is there to point to?
It's a great point. Jahmyr Gibbs is having a monster year for Detroit. People laughed when they drafted him.
Yeah.
That early.
Throw positional value out the window for Dan Campbell and the Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell tearing it up
and
for them on both sides of the ball.
I get back to, and look, there is nobody in my life I've ever met, beside my wife, there's no one I've met that I have more respect for than Chris Spielman. And I bring him up on the show a lot. I mean, I was blessed to be next to him for 5 years as my partner and a very close friend away from the broadcast booth, even now. But when they hired him, and his last game as a broadcaster was here in Cincinnati 3 years ago. And he and I had dinner the night before the Bengals were playing. I think they were playing Dallas, I think. I could be wrong on that. And he said to me, hey, I'm leaving to go work for the Lions, to be the liaison basically between ownership and the players and the coaching staff. It was in essence like becoming sort of like a de facto president for the team because he was responsible for interviewing the general manager, the GM, and the head coach. Okay? Last year in the playoffs, everybody is beating Dan Campbell to death. And he made some mistakes in that playoff game. There's no doubt. And he admitted it himself. But when Chris Spielman says to me, who I consider to be one of the true leaders of men in life and on the field, no one ever played the game more of a warrior than Chris Spielman. No one. Ever. Going all the way back to high school playing for his old man, Sonny Spielman. No one understands the toughness and what it takes to win more than Spielman. And when he says to me, the best leader I have ever seen, leader of men, is Dan Campbell. He said, you watch this guy 24/7 around, their players, staff, away from some of the football stuff. He said it's just unbelievable. And that team reflects Dan Campbell. On 3rd and 1, they're going to smash you in the mouth. On 4th and 2, they're going to smash you in the mouth. And I don't know if they're going to win the Super Bowl or not. We'll find out. But, man, if it's not going to be the Bengals, for me, I'm all in on Detroit rooting for them. I'm rooting for them to do it. All right. Kenner and company, you included.
That's right.
Elliot's here. I'm sure he'll be a barrel full of monkeys about the Cincinnati Bengals today.
He's always so optimistic, Tom.
Kenner's going to be fired up about the Brownies.
Oh, you know he will be.
All right. So we will be back on Thursday at noon. And Jacob, thanks for everything today.
Of course.
Great
Thank
job.
you.
Thank all of you for joining us. And here we go. Off the Bench begins right now.
The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great.
Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Oh, no, we're good.
We're good.
Just buffer a little bit. Just a brief glitch, that's all. But welcome in.
Shout out to Tom, dialed in, Luke, and of course, you got Jacob in the producer chair just wrapping up dialed in, and now we continue on with our morning here. Happy Monday, everybody. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett in the producer chair today. Shout out to Casey. Looking forward to getting him back here very soon. And then we got our guy, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Champions Grill himself. Yes, those are not free ads, actually. Those are paid, legit
Correct.
ads. Our friends at Champions Grill, we hope you're doing well today. But Mr. Elliot Rearing, good morning.
Morning. How we doing?
Good. I noticed you said morning. You didn't say good morning. You just said morning.
Yeah, it's just not a good morning. It's a morning. It is a morning. I woke up this morning and it was fine. I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but just once I'd like to wake up on a Monday and just be excited about the Bengals. One time. I'll just never get it, and that's okay. That's okay. They're going to lose and keep losing and be inconsistent, and that's okay. But I just like one time, I just like to get up here. Because even in the wins we've had this year, and I know that we've kind of talked about it already, and a win's a win, and every win in the NFL is big. But you beat the Giants in a terrible game where the offense didn't show up. You beat the Browns where it took 3 quarterbacks for the Browns to look somewhat competent. And then you beat, who else? Who's the other team we beat? I don't even know the other team we beat.
The glorious Panthers.
The Panthers, that's right. The Andy Dalton-led Panthers. It's just not a season. It's not a fruitful season. It's not going to be a fruitful season. At this point in, like, there's no cavalry coming. You know what they are. And it's sad. It's a sad realization.
Yeah, and with where we're at right now, and again, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, instant reaction to Week 8 of the NFL season. Still a game to go. Steelers and Giants later on tonight. Pulling for the Giants, but don't think that's going to pan out. I think the Steelers come away with that one. But yeah, a lot to react to coming out of the weekend. I think right now we're at the point of the season, at the halfway point, where you kind of are who you are right now. Like, unless you're a team that's been riddled with injuries or whatever, you kind of are who you are. And I think Cincinnati is who they are. I think that the reason that Bengals fans are patient at the beginning is because, well, you had the built-in excuse of, well, we kind of always start slow. And there was a lot of injuries. The defense was very banged up at the beginning of the season, no doubt. And then it was kind of a shocker when the injury report came out the other day. It was one of the shortest injury reports of the season, but there was one name on it, and it was one key name, and that was, of course, T. Higgins. And would T. Higgins have made a difference yesterday? There's no doubt about it. How much of a difference? That's the big question mark at this point, because I'm not sure where Bengals fans are leaning in towards of where they're frustrated with right now, other than just saying the loss. Because defensively, even with being fully healthy, you give up 30-plus points against the Eagles, yes. Offensively, for the third straight week, just something seems off. Could it be as simple as T not out there yesterday? Maybe, but they looked just as sluggish the previous couple of weeks, and as Elliot mentioned, with the win over the Giants and the Browns. I was intrigued by this matchup. We talked about it Friday, mainly because I didn't really know who the Bengals were heading into this Eagles matchup, and I thought we were going to learn a lot about both teams, and unfortunately we did. I think we learned that the Eagles, with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and those guys, it's a pretty good football team over there. Washington getting all the love, as they should. They're the new exciting team over there. But Philly, they've navigated through some, with the issues they've had with their coaching staff, everything. They've kind of navigated through the murky waters a bit. They'll be all right. But the Bengals, it was one of those, okay, when they were scoring a lot of points, they were losing football games. And then when they stopped scoring a lot of points, they'd won back-to-back games. So I was like, who the heck is this team? We know they need to score points to win football games. They can't continue to score less than 20 a game and win football games, but they were able to navigate through. Every win counts to a certain extent, as we talked about. But yesterday, for the third straight week, was 17 points put up on the board. They've averaged 16 points the offense, 16 points the last 3 weeks, 1 touchdown a game through the air. Obviously, from play calling to just the look, the vibe, the feel, the scheme, whatever it is, coaching, Zack Taylor. There's so much to dissect from what happened yesterday because we learned that, defense is still a problem, but something we didn't think a problem is a problem. It's the offense, too. It's Zack Taylor. I've defended Zack Taylor a lot to you guys saying, hey, guys, can we stop blaming Zack Taylor for everything, that this team has a lot of holes. But I said that initially because offensively they're fine. When they were putting up 30 a game and losing because they were giving up 30 a game, I was like, let's hold off on burying Zack Taylor. But for 3 straight weeks, we're almost going a full month now where this offense just does not look like it's rolling. And you don't have an excuse. You have Joe Burrow, no T yesterday, but you've had T and Jamar for most of the season. There's really no excuse to be talking about some of the offensive deficiencies that a lot of people are talking about at this point. The problem is, as each week has gone on, they've got healthier. And as each week has gone on, there's actually been more question marks that have come about. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. This was supposed to be a season that there were Super Bowl expectations, and now I don't even know if the expectation is to make the playoffs. Mathematically, still very much in the hunt. But with what we saw yesterday, the offense a problem, defense, even when healthy, still a problem. Zack Taylor still seems to be regressing and losing. I don't say losing the locker room, but like he threw Burrow under the bus a little yesterday.
Oh,
and you think he's losing the locker room? Yeah, this is the most off I've seen this Bengals team. We've seen them sluggish starts in seasons past. This isn't a start anymore. This is the halfway point. This is no longer a slow start. This is a 3-5 football team that had Super Bowl expectations that now I don't think the expectations are to even make the playoffs. I don't know what to make of this Bengals team. And it's disappointing because it's a talented roster and it's just not working. And it's not like it's a talented roster like the Jets that you threw together. The core has been there for a while. You plugged holes in the offseason to make this team better. And this team just seems off in so many levels. It's not just the defense, it's the offense. It's not just the offense, it's the play calling, it's the coaching, it's the scheme. Maybe when we had Trey Wingo on before the season, when he said everything he's hearing, he has sources that were covering the Bengals and saying something's off. I even said, I love Trey Wingo, but like I don't get that vibe. We've had Jay Morrison on. We had multiple Bengals reporters on. There was no vibe of things being off in camp outside of the Jamar Chase situation. He might be right. There was something off about this team heading into the season, and whatever that is still seems to be lingering 8 weeks in.
Right now, I think I'm starting to kind of get over the hill of how much I'm hurt by this Bengals season because this just isn't a very good football team. And at this point, as the rest of the season progresses, we're going to try to play spoiler for some teams that are trying to get in, and if we get really lucky and can win 7 of 9, then maybe we sneak in as a 7 seed and can dash a division winner's hopes in the first round. But I think that's the maximum I'm hoping for right now. This team is not good enough to win a Super Bowl. This team's not good enough to win multiple playoff games, and that's just the reality of the situation at this point. Last night I was texting with Reed, and I was like, it's so upsetting. I'm not ready to go talk about the Bengals this week. I'm going to do a show with Tom. I'm going to do a show with Kinner. They're going to have all their takes coming in, and I'm not going to be able to handle it. And he texted me back. He goes, why do you care? This isn't a very good football team. And that just made it click in my head.
I'm sorry that
I'm
sorry that I stressed you out over the weekend.
we're a bad team. And I think that's just where we're at right now. It's a lack of talent on the defensive side of the football, and that's combined with a poor coaching staff, and that's a doozy when you put those two together.
It's a horrible coaching staff.
Yeah.
Horrible. They went to the Super Bowl, and they went to back-to-back AFC championships on the back of Joseph Lee Burrow. That's how they got there. And when you have a great quarterback, it can certainly mask the deficiencies of having a mediocre quarterback, which is what has happened. Zack Taylor is not a good quarterback. Other teams are able to figure it out when you have one superstar. Jamar Chase has been healthy, and we're still not figuring that out. We're still not throwing the ball downfield. What do you have, 10 catches yesterday for 50 yards?
9. But yeah.
How about you throw the ball downfield a couple times? Maybe. Try to air it out.
What do you have on the first drive? 4?
Yeah. I mean,
using the rest of the game.
I mean, Jaden Daniels can throw it 95 yards when it matters. And that's the biggest part. I think when it matters most, I think Zack Taylor hides in a turtle shell. I think he's a turtle and he goes back into his shell when you need a big play. How is the play call on 4th and 1 a screen behind the sticks? How is that the play? And I was watching some of your guys' show yesterday. The running game's not great. The running game's not the best in the league. It's probably towards the bottom.
Bottom 3, I believe.
But 4th and 1, how is that the play call? There's no excuse. There's no rational thought behind it. You have Joe Burrow. You're paying him $55 million a year, and you're telling him to throw it behind him on 4th and 1, down 7 points in your own territory. It's inexcusable at this point to continue to not use Joe Burrow. I don't know how many weeks I have to sit and watch the team where the offense isn't good. I don't care that T. Higgins is out. T. Higgins is very important. He's a very good wide receiver. Very good. Mike Gesicki was great yesterday. He was great. I'm sick and tired of it. The fact that this offense can't be consistently good at this point is a joke. Somebody's responsible for it. And that's why I said at the beginning of the year, the fact that we still have to sit here and talk about the beginning of each season with losses. You lost to the Patriots at home. You're 0-4 at home. It's great that you went to a Super Bowl.
Patriots just beat Aaron Rodgers.
That's true. It's great that you went to a Super Bowl. It was the best moment in my fandom as a Cincinnati sports fan. But what are we doing? Figure it out. The defense is bad. I get it. The roster construction coming into this season, a joke. Terrible. Terrible. But if we're going to sit here and act like we can't win football games because our defense is bad, there's a lot of bad defenses in the NFL. And maybe yesterday it wouldn't have happened. But the offense scored 17 points. That doesn't win football games. And everybody knows that going into games despite what this defense has been. Zack Taylor has to have figured it out by now. You have Jamar Chase. You have Joe Burrow. You have competent options around him. Not good options at this point without T. Higgins, but competent. Teams win with worse. So now we're sitting here on what's the date? August 28th, halfway through the season? This had to have been figured out by now. You haven't beaten one good football team. One. You beat the Carolina Panthers, who might be the worst football team in NFL history. You beat the New York Giants without their two best offensive players. And then you beat, who was the other team? I keep forgetting who they beat because they beat nobody. They beat the Cleveland Browns without any players. And by the way, we were talking about it before the show, Jameis Winston enters that game instead of DTR, you lose. Probably by 2 scores. The team isn't good enough. It's the responsibility of somebody to figure it out. In my opinion, that's on the head coach and the NFL franchise. I know what I've said about David Bell. I know the coaching in Major League Baseball. I know my opinion on it. I think it's vastly different in the NFL. Vastly. And I have to sit here and watch this Bengals offense look terrible. I don't get it. And it frustrates me because they should be better. If we lose every game 45-40, hey, we know the problem. Defense is terrible. Roster construction didn't get it done. Duke Tobin, somebody needed to figure it out. 3 straight weeks where the offense is abysmal. That's on somebody, and that's on Zack Taylor. You cannot waste Joe Burrow seasons. He's a healthy Joe Burrow, and you've wasted it. You've pissed it away. Win 7 of 9. LOL. You think this team's winning 7 of 9? They can't beat anybody. The only thing, honest to God, the only thing that's saving them right now is that they play the world's worst schedule. 0-4 at home. You lose week 1 every single week. Sorry for the rant.
Don't ever apologize. And I love angry Elliott, as long as he's not, angry at me, nonetheless. But yeah, Cincinnati again, they go down at the hands of the Eagles yesterday at home, 37-17. Now 0-4 at Paycor Stadium. They drop now to 3-5 on the season. Eagles improved to 5-2. We'll do our trip around the AFC North coming up here later on, but there's still a lot to dissect from this game yesterday. Because again, the thing that's wild is like losing to the Eagles. It's not like that's a bad loss. You can lose to that's a good football team. But at the same time, we joked last week. I said if you look at the wins that the Bengals have had, it looks like the draft order. I mean, you talked about it, Elliot. I mean, it's obviously the Panthers, it's the Giants, it's the Browns. I mean, all those teams are going to be picking at the top of the draft at this point. So they're beating bad teams outside of the loss against the Patriots back in Week 1. But when you play the good teams, you haven't been able to come out on top. You lose to the Commanders, who at the time we thought was a bad loss. Now, I mean, a loss is bad. Don't get me wrong, but Washington's a good football team. The Chiefs are undefeated, Super Bowl contender. The Eagles, a contender out of the NFC. You lose to them, but you get blown out by double digits. The difference about this loss, I think, that has everyone feeling more sour about it than anything is when you lost to the Chiefs, you were right there. When you lost to the Commanders, you were right there. Great quarterback play from Jane Daniels, good quarterback play from Patrick Mahomes. Joe Burrow outplayed both those quarterbacks in those games, and we chalked it up to, well, it's the defense. If the defense, just average defense, they come out on top in both of those games. Yesterday, it reminded me of the Chiefs game, reminded me of the Commanders game where you're giving up a lot of points, but at the same time, the offense couldn't complement it. They couldn't keep up with the defense's poor output when it's all said and done. Let's pick up with this. We do have a new producer. We made Omaha.
That's right.
Audible. That's right. Oh, look at you. Look what we got, everybody. He snuck in.
Snuck right in here.
I like it.
I'm here.
I was like, well, Casey, the Bengals lost yesterday. He ain't coming in.
He's not coming.
But he came in today, and that's all that matters. But we'll be right back. More off the bench when we come back. Casey back in. Now he's in the producer chair. Elliot, his blood pressure is we got to work on getting that down a bit. And we'll get to Jacob, who, of course, is, he's been talking about this for a while. He was on Dialed In earlier with Tom Brenneman and now having to reflect on this again
for
the next couple of hours.
That's right. At least I didn't do a postgame show right after the game or anything.
Yeah. You're earning your money now. All right. We'll be right back. More off the bench when we come back.
Maybe 07.
All right, Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister in the producer chair, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett back with you here. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Everyone's fired up today. Everyone's very passionate about what happened over the weekend. Again, week 8 to the NFL season, you kind of are who you are. You kind of get through that first month of the season. It's that feeling out portion where you don't want to get too high on the good and you don't want to get too low on the bad. But right now, 2 months in, it's not even a pattern anymore. It's just the identity. And the identity of the Bengals team is bad defense. The only thing you could add to it now is the concern offensively. What has happened? We could sit there and you talked about the bad coaching, Elliot. We've talked about the question marks with Zack Taylor, this, that, and the other. But it's not as if this offense has been this poor from week 1 to now. We saw this offense at one point clicking to the point where Joe Burrow was like, everyone was like, man, this is a wasted season. He would be the MVP, this, that, and the other if the defense was good. Well, even when the defense was holding teams down like the Browns and the Giants the last couple of weeks, Joe Burrow and the offense weren't able to muster up enough firepower to be able to take advantage of those situations. Now, they still get the win. But yesterday, again, 3 straight weeks where the Bengals offense sputters. I think there's a major concern on that offensive side of the ball. But what the hell's happened? Because it's not like that's been the case from the very beginning. What has happened from the last time we saw this team? When was the last time the offense was on? Was it the Commanders game? What was the last game that they put the world that they I guess the Panthers.
The Ravens. They looked incredible against the Ravens.
The Ravens, yeah. So from that point where that game ended against the Ravens to now, it's a night and day difference. It's not the same football team. We watched them torch the Panthers. We watched them torch the Ravens. They torched the Commanders. They torched a lot of teams. But they're not torching anybody except their playoff chances at this point. What has changed? What is going on with this offense right now? It can't just be Zack Taylor, or is it?
I got a couple thoughts on this. Number one, the run game for a little bit looked solid. We kept complimenting Chase Brown. We kept complimenting Zach Moss. For a little bit there, the run game was fine. The past couple weeks, it's been eviscerated. You got to, and this is where I don't want to sit here and bash Evan McPherson today. He's been a very good kicker, and I'm gonna try to remain calm on Evan McPherson.
I don't know that he has been a very good kicker.
He can't make a 50-yard field goal
in years.
He can't make a 50-yard field goal. So when you're an offense that thrives on having one of the best kickers in the league not make field goals, you're going to lose points and you're going to lose opportunities to score. I don't trust Evan McPherson anymore. I don't. It's great. I love what he did for the Bengals. Again, I thank him. I thank Zack Taylor. Thank you for getting us to the Super Bowl. Thank you very much. But you haven't been watching Evan McPherson over the past year and a half, 2 years, and feel confident in this guy making a 52-yard field goal. You can't. And I know that it's asking maybe too much to make 55 plus, but that's what the NFL is now. You have to make that. In terms of or in regards of the rest of the offense, T. Higgins has made a massive difference. A massive difference. He frees up Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase gets open. But I think this is a play calling issue. I think this is a scheme issue. There's something with the offense that doesn't work. There's no reason that Jamar Chase, and by the way, he has been the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL this season. He has been. There's no reason that he should be bottled up Throw the ball downfield a couple times, man. I'm not saying you got to go throw Hail Marys every play, but every once in a while, 9 catches for 50 yards? They just haven't been good enough. Now, they were somehow good on third down yesterday. I think they were, 10 of 13 on third down? How that didn't equate to anything is mind-boggling.
They weren't great on third down yesterday. They had great numbers on third down because they went 7 of 7 on their first drive.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything the rest of the game.
Yeah.
The Bengals, for the third week in a row now, have opened the game with something that made me think we're going to have an altogether wonderful game. The Bengals opened the game against the Eagles with the best offensive drive of any team in the NFL all year. Longest touchdown drive of any team all year. 10 minutes, 17 plays, touchdown. Clinical. Third down and 7, doesn't matter. We'll get it.
Yep.
3rd and 2, we'll run for it. Doesn't matter. Move the ball like a hot knife through butter. It was the easiest thing we've ever seen. Then you turn around and you don't do anything all game. You score 10 points the rest of the game. How does that happen? What changes? And I hear everyone saying it's T. Higgins not being out there and Zack Taylor can't scheme open Jamar Chase and the anger that comes about it because other teams can. Other teams can scheme open their number 1 without a number 2. We 100%. Saw it in San Francisco. We saw it in Minnesota already happening when Jordan Addison missed games. Justin Jefferson's still putting up numbers. Zack Taylor can't do it. And I think that's something that we need to come to realize. If Zack Taylor's going to be the head coach, you have to have 2 elite weapons. That's just the truth. You have to. Because otherwise, he's not going to be able to get them open. He's not creative enough. He's not a good enough offensive mind to do it. Is Jamar Chase good enough to be the only wide receiver on a championship offense? Absolutely. That offense can absolutely work if you have Andy Reid, if you have a good play caller, if you have a guy with a good system. Zack Taylor's not that. Zack Taylor's a guy who's called plays one time in his career before now at a college, and he stunk at it when he was there.
One of the worst offensive seasons in the history of the program.
The history of FBS. And now he's calling plays for the Bengals, and we wonder why it doesn't work so well. I think the one thing that fans are going to have to come to realization with very quickly is that Zack Taylor will not be fired this offseason. Zack Taylor will be the head coach of the Bengals in 2025 and probably in 2026 unless 2025 goes very, very bad.
And this is where I disagree with you a little bit. And I know what the Bengals' track record is. I know they don't fire guys. But for the first time ever, and I've made this point before, for the first time ever, they do have something on the line here. You're paying a quarterback more than you've ever played a player in your franchise's history. They know what's going on here. And they know this fan base, and they know what's going to happen if you keep losing games. Nobody's going to show up. Kinner made the joke last week that the team had blackouts for a couple seasons. And that's fair, and that's a fair point. People are going to stop showing up if you're going to keep losing like this. You can't waste seasons, and you've wasted one. You've burned one. Last year, you get off the hook. I think what you did with Jake Browning was somewhat commendable. Good job. You went to a Super Bowl. You went to back-to-back AFC title games. Thank you very much. He's not a good head coach.
But
he's not a good.
Did you hear what you just said, though?
They win. The Cincinnati Bengals win in spite of Zack Taylor.
I'm not defending Zack here, but did you hear what you just said? That you glossed over that. Like that's not like he was the head coach that got you to a Super Bowl, back-to-back AFC.
He has more wins
games.
than any coach in the history of this franchise.
And I'm not defending him. But like it can't all be on real quick because Casey's been a very good student. He's been raising his hand across from me, and we've all just said, "Forget you, Casey."
Well, I was just sorry. Yeah.
No, don't apologize. No, you're good. But I know you wanted to chime in on exactly what they're talking about, real quick.
Yeah, I mean we've hit a lot of points here. We've talked about Zack Taylor not being the greatest play caller, reasons why he should be fired, reasons why he shouldn't be fired. In my opinion. Something that Jacob touched on, he can't scheme open receivers. I don't necessarily agree with that, and I think that's why it makes it even more egregious. Because yesterday, we saw plenty of plays where Jamar Chase was in motion. He was behind receivers on like pick routes and things like that. They can scheme him open, but refuse to do it throughout the game. They refuse to do it for other players. And then when it comes down to the 4th down call, we're throwing it behind the line of scrimmage 3 yards and asking a guy to beat 2 guys off the line because we just don't have a receiver 2. We don't have a receiver 3 that can block someone down the field. This offense right now and defense has maybe a maximum of 3 playmakers altogether on this team. Altogether. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Trey Hendrickson. That's it. Everyone else, scrap them because they're not good enough. And I personally, I'm not going to kill Zack Taylor because I've seen what it looks like when we have the pieces around him, right? But yesterday is just inexcusable. The handful of plays that we needed to execute and execute at a high level to get the conversion, to extend the drive, to get a touchdown, were horrible calls. Just almost dumbfounding calls. Why are we throwing a screen 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage on 4th down, 4th and 1? Why do we not have the capabilities of realizing that the best player on the team should have the options available to him to make the right call, instead of either handing the ball off where he has no control, or having to throw a screen where he's forced to throw it to Jamar? And I love Jamar. But he's not beating 2 guys, right? I just don't get it. I don't understand why we refuse to give Joe the ball when it matters most. And that is, to me, the most inexcusable part of Zack Taylor's coaching. And it's been like that for years. It's tough, guys. I think it's a mixture of a lot of things. I think play calling's bad at key moments, and I think this team doesn't have the players around it. And you just see what it looks like right now. It's 3-5. It's beating the worst teams, barely, scraping by, and getting blown out by the best teams.
We're a really, really good bad football team.
Yeah.
Like, if you take the worst 10 teams in the league, the Bengals are much better than the other 9. They probably lose to the 11th worst team. Like, we're really good if we play the Panthers and the Browns with Deshaun and, the Giants. We're really good if we play those teams. Probably a playoff team. Maybe 10-7. Maybe we win 7-9 if we play those teams the rest of the way. Spoiler alert, you don't. You get a really easy schedule the rest of the way, but you're going to be an underdog in, 4 or 5 of those 7 games, depending on how they look at the Steelers?
Yep.
What has this team showed you over the last 8 weeks that leads you to believe they can upset anyone? Or even win the 4 games they're going to be favored in? I think, I said it on Tom's show, I think the best case scenario for the Bengals this year in terms of getting fans back engaged and having some fun at the end of the year. Obviously, we can talk about winning 7 of 9. I don't think there's any chance in hell that happens. I don't think this team's good enough to do so. I think anything, maybe by Wednesday I can get to a point where I'm talking myself into it. And if we beat the Raiders by 30, who are, again, a really bad team, then maybe I'll be back in by the time we get to Baltimore. And if we're 5-5 coming out of Baltimore, everything's all of a sudden right in front of us again. But what has this team showed you that leads you to believe that they can get any closer than a 41-38 overtime loss to Baltimore?
And again, for the record, I didn't expect the Bengals to beat the Eagles. I think the Eagles are a better football team. But the fact that you get your doors blown off to that team, I don't get it. I don't get how that is allowed to happen. I don't get how it happens. The Kansas City Chiefs, and I know it's hard to compare some of the best teams in the NFL to the Bengals, but that was our expectation coming in, so I'm going to do it right now. The Kansas City Chiefs lose half their offense. They still win games. Kareem Hunt off the street comes in as, the 5th best rusher in the NFL since joining that team? The Buffalo Bills don't have players anywhere. James Cook's fine. James Cook's a fine running back. You get Amari Cooper. Outside of that, who's he throwing to? Dalton Kincaid's fine.
Keon's pretty good.
Keon's been okay.
Number 1 wide receiver in the NFL, yards over expectation.
Other teams are able to figure this out. The Denver Broncos somehow have 5 wins. 5 wins that team has. The Pittsburgh Steelers haven't lost either.
Both of those teams have top 5 defenses.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, I guess.
And the Chiefs have Andy Reid calling plays.
My point is that if you have one side of the football like we do, there's no reason to not at least have a winning record right now. There's no reason. And the fact that this offense looks so bad for 3 straight weeks, it's a testament to our offensive mastermind, Zack Taylor. And by the way, coming into this year, we gave him the benefit of the doubt. He's an offensive guy. He doesn't worry about the defense. It's his job. He's the head coach. He's not the offensive coordinator. If you want him to be the offensive coordinator, God bless us if that's the case. But he's the head coach. He's at some point you're responsible for the defense as well. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, part of it too is their inability to adapt and change. The things that have changed with this offense is that they have not changed, that they have not adapted. The good run game that we had has not changed one bit. They have not adapted to what teams are doing to stop that one single bit. They have not changed anything that they're going to do in their passing game. One single bit. It worked for a couple weeks. Now you see that teams have caught up. They're struggling. And so now you're asking a defense who we know is very, very suspect. Probably bottom fourth of the league. And we're asking them to hold guys to 21, 24 points. It's just not going to happen. And we come back to the same old argument that Joe Burrow has to be perfect, the offense has to be perfect in order to win ball games. And that's not Zack Taylor. That's not what this Bengals team has been for years at this point. The identity of the Bengals throughout their Super Bowl run was good enough offense, competent defense, bend, don't break, and being able to kick field goals when it matters. They can't do any of those things right now.
Right.
100%.
And the one thing that we talked about on this defense is every time we kill this defense, it's always followed up by the qualifier, except Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah.
Well, Trey Hendrickson was lined up against the worst PFF tackle in pass blocking in the entire league in Fred Johnson, 79th out of 79, and he didn't do anything on Sunday. Fred Johnson ate him alive.
That just feels like a team that's given up.
That's exactly what I'm getting at here. What is this defense going to do anymore? If Trey Hendrickson doesn't think anyone else on the line can get pressure because they can't, and he doesn't think the secondary can hold up for longer than 2.5 seconds, then how is he lining up out there 35, 40 times a game and giving 110% effort to rush the passer? He's the only player on this defense worth a damn, except for the couple times a game these linebackers want to play. Those are the only 3 guys that I've even seen Mike Hill. Only 4 guys that I've even seen like legitimate heart out of this year. Everyone else is giving up on defense. We had 0 pressures from the interior defensive line. 0. 1 from B.J. Hill. 1 QB hurry from B.J. Hill. 0 pressures from the rest of the interior defensive line. That is insanity.
They had 3 injuries on their offensive line, by the way. 3, and we couldn't get any pressure. I mean, I get the Eagles' offensive line is pretty good, but when you don't have your best 2 tackles, probably in all football, Lane Johnson and Mailata, and then you're missing your guard. I mean, like, what are we doing? How can we not get any pressure? And I don't know, guys. Like, I hate ranting about this because it feels like there's no point because there's no help coming.
Right.
But this team right now, it's not adapting. It's stuck in 2021, and it can't get out of its own way. And I think that it's time to realize the fact that this is not a good team. The leadership has completely just failed this team. They're not trying very hard, it feels like. And they're just not good enough. That's just simply it. I don't know what it's going to take. I don't feel like they're going to be able to save this season. I think that's kind of if you wanted to take a glimmer of hope, this is the one game that they could lose.
Yeah,
if you still want playoff hopes, it's an NFC loss. So if they do win 7 out of 9 the rest of the way, like Joe Burrow kind of led us on to believe is doable, which is not doable, then there's still playoff hopes, right? But the thing is, you play the Raiders and then you play the Ravens. So we'll see what happens here in the next couple weeks, but I just don't have any faith. You lose to the Ravens and you have 1 game left to lose, and it's just not attainable. So
no, we're playing spoiler. We're playing spoiler, and we're going to have a chance to do it against a couple teams. I mean, we play the Broncos, their second to last week of the season. They certainly look like they're going to be in the mix for the AFC wild card. Knock them out. Play the Steelers in Week 18, and they have a chance to knock them out. I mean, if we're playing Week 18, already eliminated from the playoffs, we win in Pittsburgh to knock the Steelers out of the playoffs. That'll feel like a playoff win. We'll get excited about that one. So maybe we get a couple good games on the schedule the rest of the way. We go down to Dallas. If we win that game, I'll get excited about it, even though both these teams are crap. But, I think at this point we're rooting for to play spoiler because this season is over in terms of any kind of Super Bowl aspirations. Even if they do win 7 of 9, I just cannot talk myself into them winning 4 more then. So I just don't think it's possible.
Not to mention like Orlando Brown being nicked up and just
why would we
not
play
being able
him?
to play.
Why would we play him?
Yeah, like I just
if this is a lingering injury, why would we play him? There's nothing to gain at 3-5 to get him hurt long term that lingers into next year. I think that's a part where we're at with the Bengals right now. And we were talking after the Browns game or before the Browns game. If the Browns beat the Bengals, do you start calling about trades and stuff? Are we in that place right now? Are you picking up the phone at 3-5?
I'm going to say no, and we'll discuss why when we come back. AFC, wild day yesterday in the AFC, and that's what we'll discuss. We'll pick up with that because that's a good question because, again, the NFL's so reactionary. The sky's always falling, right? Like last week we said, you could lose to the Eagles and still be okay. Well, you lost to the Eagles, and it doesn't seem okay. Yeah. It doesn't seem okay, but let's pick up with that. This is Off the Bench. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, and Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench on Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton. 37-17 the final yesterday, the Eagles over the Bengals, and the sky is officially falling. And again, that whole it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Well, it's not that you lost, it's how you lost. Right. I think that's why one thing we talked about before, taking a brief pause was, do the Bengals start maybe entertaining calls? The trade deadline is a week from today or a week from tomorrow.
Week from tomorrow.
A week from tomorrow. Election day.
That's right.
A week from tomorrow is the trade deadline. College football playoff rankings.
That's right.
Trade deadline a week from tomorrow. It's a huge day. Huge. But no, with the trade deadline coming up, you had a couple games here where a lot of teams are kind of auditioning. They're either trying to figure out who they are and auditioning talent at the same time. Because if you do figure out who you are, and who you are kind of scares you in regards to, oh, man, we're not good enough to make the playoffs, or maybe good enough to flirt with the playoffs, but we're definitely not winning a Super Bowl. Those are the questions the front office needs to ask. The front office, of course, being the Cincinnati Bengals. They need a reality check. They need to know exactly who they are. And that's why I kind of think having the Raiders come up is bad. I think it stinks that you guys play the Raiders before the trade deadline, because that could be another one of those Browns, Giants, Panthers, false sense of security games where you go in and you take care of business against the Raiders. The Raiders aren't a good football team. And then you feel good, you get that win, you think, okay, we got this train back on the tracks, but then reality hits you again against Baltimore, and you're like, well, damn, we didn't move on from T. We didn't maybe dangle Trey Hendrickson out there. We didn't, and again, I'm just throwing out random names. Or, you lose to the Raiders and say, okay, fine, whoever the hell you want outside of Burrow and Burrow and Jamar, it's open season, right? I don't know. I think that the Raiders, that stinks that that's the team you play on Sunday, because you should win.
Yeah.
And just because you win on Sunday doesn't mean that all your problems are solved. It just means that you talked about it. They're a really good bad football team. They are better than a lot of the teams at the bottom of the AFC. But here's the deal. The AFC, the reason you shouldn't totally panic, although question the offense and the scheme right now, because the defense, the reason I'm not bringing up the defense is because we shouldn't be surprised. The defense has been bad all season. You should be concerned about the offense, because the offense was the whole reason that you maybe had slight hope that they can overcome the deficiencies on the defensive end of the ball. But here's the deal. You look at what happened yesterday. The Colts lost. The Dolphins lost. The Raiders lost. The Jaguars. You look at all the Jets, most importantly, lost, because the Jets were the team I circled as being that team that the Bengals are going to be fighting it out with. I know the Broncos won. They're sitting there at 5-3. I have no faith in the Broncos. I do not think, I know in a normal year, double-digit wins is what you need to secure a playoff spot. Bad teams are going to make the final two spots in the playoffs, in my opinion. And bad teams could still be 9-win teams. And I think the Bengals could still be a 9-win football team. 7 of 9, I actually think, for me personally, I think it's 6. I think the magic number for the Bengals is 6. You win at least 6 of your next games, I think you're right there for that possible final wildcard spot. The problem for Jacob and Elliot and Casey and Bengals fans is that doesn't seem good, because you had Super Bowl expectations coming in, and here you are holding your breath, crossing your fingers, and praying to the big guy upstairs that, well, hopefully we can make the 7 seed. I understand why that doesn't get you guys all juiced up and excited, but the reality is the AFC is bad. It's really bad. It's to the point now where I was listening to Sports Talk in Cleveland today. Even the little Browns fans think their 2-6 team might have a chance at the playoffs. Mathematically, very much so in it. The Browns at 2-6 are looking up at, the Dolphins, who they'll be fighting it out with. They're 2-5. The Bengals are 3-5. The Bengals have one more win than the Browns. The Colts are 4-4. What a train wreck yesterday that was.
He was tired.
We're all tired.
He was tired.
Casey was tired.
NFL game, he was tired, guys.
Why do you think Casey didn't come in right away? He was tired.
It's a tough
You need a little
quote.
nap.
Yeah,
it's just the third quarter of an NFL football game. It's okay.
It's a tough quote.
So to sum up, I know what you're saying. I don't think the Bengals' playoff hopes are dead at all. I think
that's fair.
You said they're a really good bad football team. Well, a really good bad football team is going to get one of those final 2 spots in the AFC. And I think it's the Bengals. The Colts I have no faith in. The Chargers I'm intrigued by. If they make a move at the deadline, I'm very intrigued by them. But they got Cleveland coming up. I think the Chargers and Browns, look at this matchup coming up on Sunday, and we're like, we're going to dictate who we are the rest of the season based on this matchup. I feel like I say that every week, though. But yeah, I think the bottom of the AFC is vulnerable. And I think right now you're upset. You're pissed off about the loss. You lost by 20. You got blown out at home. You're 0-4 at home. NFC team, though, the AFC is wide open.
The only thing that does scare me about that is if it was 6-3, then I might be a little bit more optimistic than the 7-2. And I do think a 9-win team's going to get in the AFC. My only worry about the Bengals there is we already have the 3 conference losses. It's going to be really tough to have a tiebreaker. Unless those, the 6-3, those 3 losses came against all 3 NFC teams, then you're looking pretty. I think if you end the season with 3 AFC losses, you're probably in the playoffs with 9 wins. But I just don't see a way that we beat the Steelers twice and the Ravens. And I'm not glossing over the Browns with Jameis. So.
Let's play the game. Let's go down the line and we'll take a vote. You 3 will vote. Raiders versus Bengals. Now I would have said, by the way, this would have if we beat the Eagles, this would have been a trap game and we would have actually lost this. But now you need it. Raiders at Bengals. Win or loss? I'll start.
Win. They're winning it.
That's a win.
Casey, win. Okay. Bengals at Ravens Thursday night.
Loss.
You're going with the lot.
Smoked.
That secondary, I'm going with the win.
I'm going loss.
I'm going loss too.
Okay.
Who day?
All right.
Who
So
day?
now we
They
have-
got Homer over here,
That's right. Now we have one loss to play with. At Chargers.
Loss. Bullied in the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, what?
Run for 6.5 yards a carry. Loss.
I think they lose that one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So now
out of losses. Out of losses.
Out of wiggle room.
with 6 to go. The Steelers.
Loss.
At home.
All right, I'm out.
Yeah. Loss. Hold on. Do the next one.
At Dallas.
Loss. Next
think
one.
Titans.
Win.
Dallas is bad. But
Browns at home.
I don't think it
Browns at
matters.
home with Jameis.
Hold on. Dallas is bad. How many times do you think CeeDee Lamb's going to have no one within 15 yards of him?
Dallas.
I
mean, that's what I mean. I think we're looking at 8 and 9, best case.
We can go down the line and say, 7 and 9. Let's win them all, baby. Let's go another 10-game win streak. Let's do it. It's not happening. It's impossible. It's impossible. If you show up week 1 and beat the Patriots like you were supposed to, and the Bengals are better than the New England Patriots. I don't care who's their quarterback. I don't care what they got going on. At home, there is zero excuse to lose that game. And it set the tone for the season, and that's a testament to Zack Taylor, who consistently doesn't get the team ready to play. Consistently. And if you disagree, that's fine. But I don't know how many seasons we have to start behind the 8 ball. Every single year, loss. 1-3, 2-4, 2-3. And you're just scraping and fighting, and you're fighting. You don't get to just fight down every single time and hope to win everything. It doesn't work that way. At some point, you need leads. You need to be up 2-0. You need to have a 2-game over 500 record at some point early on in the year. And again, I'm not gonna compare the Bengals to the best teams in the AFC or the NFL. The Detroit Lions, I mean, their defense isn't great. They score 75 points a game. Their quarterback threw for 80 yards yesterday. 80. He threw for 80 yards in an NFL game. He threw for 3 touchdowns, and they scored 50. Other teams find ways to win. The Bengals do not. There is no way to win. Special teams is mediocre, the defense is trash, and the offense for the better part of the year, terrible. So now what do we got? You got Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, which, by the way, that was another part of the season that people are going to forget. The Bengals initiated the whole Jamar Chase deal. They initiated it and didn't get it done. So we'll see what happens going forward. I have very low hopes. And I have to just sit here and take it, honestly, because it's just what it is. I don't think they're trading for anybody. Now that's silly. Sorry, they're not trading anybody away.
I can tell you they're not trading for anybody.
Correct. They're not going to tank. They don't know how to tank.
The other thing about tanking, and I think it goes back to what you're saying about how they're not all the way out of it, this team's not going to be that bad with trading T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson and those people. You'd still have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. You're not going to end the season at 3-13. You're going to win some other games. And if you end the season 5-12, 6-11, what are you picking? 12th? 13th? Is that worth it? Probably not. Pick 18.
Well,
fight to go 9-8.
Even if you get that, even if you get that pick, Bengals, you trust in the Bengals to make a good pick?
Yeah, we've had pretty good track record in the first round.
Defensively?
I don't think we're necessarily taking defense.
We're not taking defense first round?
I think it's the worst thing people do in every draft conversation ever is to pencil in picks before the board falls. You take the best player available that can help the team right away.
Okay.
Because they're kind of in that win now.
You
mode.
need a wide receiver, and you need a
well,
running
and I guess we
back,
can talk. I guess we can talk about that a little bit too. The T. Higgins thing. I think T. Higgins is a great wide receiver. So does everyone in Bengals fandom. But at some point, the best ability is availability. If you're never going to play, and when I say never, it's you play 10 games a year. If you're just not going to play a majority of the season, then what's the point?
Yeah,
you're not worth anything to me. If you
don't
play.
He's made it impossible to trade him right now because he's got a hamstring injury.
Right.
Like
the only thing, if you're
quad,
the Bengals, you
go down the line.
You tell T, hey, your value's shot because you can't stay healthy, so maybe now you can keep him.
Someone will pay him. Someone will take that risk.
Pay.
Someone's going to be desperate for a weapon and take that risk. I think the product you're getting out of T. Higgins on a consistent basis now is incredibly replaceable. The product that he's on the field giving you is not replaceable. Don't get my words twisted. When he's out there, he is not replaceable. He is incredible. But he's only out there for 10 to 12 games a year. And I think I'd rather have 17 of a little bit less than 10 to 12 of what T. Higgins giving us. And I think you can get that early in the draft or in free agency for cheaper than T. Higgins.
We've talked about this in the past, and people just chalked it up to me hating, but I do think there's a pattern that's developed. Now, you'll chalk it up to the scheme and this, that, and the other. You brought up Justin Jefferson still putting up numbers regardless of who's next to him. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, those two are interchangeable. They put up numbers regardless of who's lined up next to him. You can go down the list with a lot of these wide receivers. The Jamar Chase thing is just wild. His production, the way it just fizzles out when T. Higgins is not lined up next to him. Now, yesterday, we do this Sunday morning show. It's an NFL show every Sunday. And we were previewing this matchup, and I said, well, this was a big opportunity for Jamar Chase and the Cincinnati Bengals offense. Not that you're happy that T's not out there, but they need to prove that they can go against a good quality team like the Eagles and Jamar still be Jamar and Joe still be Joe and this offense still be efficient. Because right now there's people questioning, like there's a lot of people saying, well, you can't let T go. Look at this offense with T and look at the offense without T. So Jamar Chase, they march right down the field, that 10-minute plus drive, beautiful drive, by the way. There was one point where I said, hey, what did the Eagles do on the opening possession? They're like, no, the Eagles have not touched the ball yet. I'm like, they've had the ball this entire time, the Bengals. So, of course, they punch it into the end zone. Jamar Chase catches it. All the Bengals fans from the bar come out and start yelling at me, oh, what do you got to say about Jamar now? So I was like, all right, I have to eat it. Then I leave. And I go and I start watching the game later, and I start looking. I'm like, well, he finished with 54 yards. Like, he got the touchdown of the opening drive and all this. His efficiency drops off completely when T's not out there. All right, the previous game that he played without T. Higgins out there was against the Chiefs. Again, 4 catches, 35 yards, no touchdown. The previous game, New England, 6 catches, 62 yards, no touchdowns. All right, 62 yards. The previous game, 4 catches, 19 yards. The game before that, 4 catches, 81 yards. The game before that, without T. Higgins, 2 catches, 12 yards. You go down this list. When he plays without T, he disappears in this offense. And I don't get it. I don't understand it. I've never seen a wide receiver that is not so it's not dependent on who's throwing him the ball. It's dependent on who's lined up next to him. And you could say it's all on coaching, maybe, but at the same time, Jamar Chase, get open. You're too talented to blame coaching, I think.
Say what you will, ifs, ands, buts, and candy and nuts or whatever, but
nice.
Joe Burrow's interception, that just short throw to Jamar Chase, he beat his guys. If he just throws it a little further, I think that would have really opened it up, and we aren't having that conversation anymore. But I get what you're saying. I think that it makes it more difficult for this offense to operate without T. Higgins. I'll give you that. But Jamar Chase, he's a top 5 weapon. I think in any other offense, if he was with the 49ers or with the Vikings or with the Lions or any other team, they would find ways to scheme him open every single play. They just would. The Bengals offense is just so predicated on I'm going to beat you because I'm better than you instead of doing something that's clever. That's really hurt them now at this point. They used to be able to do that where they could just line up in front of you and say, I'm going to beat you because I'm better than you. That's what T. Higgins and Jamar Chase basically did all throughout that Super Bowl run. Every go route, they were just coming down with it, regardless if it was double covered or if it was guarded really well, the back shoulder throws. It was instant every time with them. Now that teams know how to play against us, it's just like we're gonna double Jamar. We know that you really love T, and if he's not out there, then your offense is gonna struggle because you don't have the guys to just beat. Like you don't have that guy that can just win one-on-one matchups. Gesicki did a pretty good job.
Great job.
All
Great
things
game.
considered.
Up until the fumble.
Up until the fumble, yeah. I mean, it's just like we don't have the roster to compete with the current – like we don't have the roster built for the scheme that we want to employ, and that's the issue.
I just emailed you Jamar Chase's route tree for this weekend, and if we can't get it up, that's completely fine, but I'm looking at it right now, and this is what I'm talking about when it comes to coaching. The lack of creativity when it comes to the skill of Jamar Chase on this team is shocking. I mean, we're going to hopefully get it up here for you, but none of his routes were more than 15 yards downfield that he got a catch on. You're not working the ball to your best player with any chance of success here. You're using him as if he's a gimmick guy, a change of pace receiver that can only –
It's like Debo. Like that was the question about Debo for a while. They were saying that the reason people put more value in Ayuk than Debo is because Debo was falling into that gimmicky route runner,
right,
as opposed to being a guy that could just go out there and open the field, this, that, the other. And I'm not saying that's Jamar. I'm just saying like that's, and I see it on the screen now.
Terrible.
They don't throw the ball downfield, dude.
And you see these same next gen stats graphs of the other elite wide receivers in the league, and you can't see where one route starts and another route ends. It's crossers. It's everywhere, starting different spots on the field, slot, outside, left, right. It's amazing.
Has this changed over the years, though?
No.
So how
this has always been the thing when T's been out.
But how? Oh, okay. You just mean in general. Okay.
Every time when T's been out, it's been you're playing with one arm tied behind your back, and that's the reason why I believe it's Zack Taylor.
I don't even think it's showing everything either because there's only 6 routes on here, and there's 9 receptions. It's missing the ones where he lost yards.
Right.
Unreal, man. Unreal.
Right.
There has to be somebody in the world that can figure out a way to have Joe Burrow as your quarterback throw the ball to Jamar Chase down the field.
Doesn't seem like it takes a rocket scientist.
There's somebody in the National Football League who has these capabilities. And it's like I don't know what else to say other than like Zack Taylor just isn't good enough. I know what he's done. I get it. He had a miracle run in 2021 and then went to another AFC Championship game the next year. I'm thank you very much. He's done more for this city as a head coach than maybe anybody in the last 30 years. So yeah, it's a commendable job, but you don't get Joe Burrow until age 40. Just not going to happen. I don't see a world where Joe Burrow plays till age 40 as a Cincinnati Bengal. So if we have limited time with him and he's healthy, there's zero excuse to not make the playoffs, to not have success. And unfortunately it falls on Zack Taylor. That's where it's going to fall. We can sit here and blame coordinators, but Zack Taylor calls the plays. So I'm tired.
Well, I think that's where it falls for Bengals fans. I keep saying that's not where it's going to fall for this front office.
I know it is. I know it's not, but you have to. You have to look at it. I think what it comes down to, honestly, is Joe Burrow. Is if Joe Burrow's done with him, he has to talk to somebody. And I think if he is able to communicate that to the front office, then maybe Taylor's gone.
The only chance Zack Taylor is fired is Joe Burrow publicly says he wants Zack Taylor fired. That is the only chance. Zack Taylor's under contract through 2026. After this season, if it continues to go as bad as it's going right now, they will fire Lou Anarumo as a scapegoat on the defensive side of the football when he doesn't have any talent at those defensive positions. They will fire Lou. They'll bring in a new defensive coordinator, and they'll give Zack Taylor another shot in 2025.
Yeah.
If it's that bad again, maybe they move on from him in 25, going into 26. I think the first chance the Bengals fans have of no Zack Taylor on that sideline is the 2027 season, because that's when his contract is up, and I don't see any way that this Brown family is eating money to fire a head coach. I just don't see it.
It's just I look around the league, the Washington Commanders, they have zero defense. You talk about not having a defense. They don't have a defense in sight, not one player. Their offense looks like the best offense in the league. They got a rookie quarterback throwing 65-yard Hail Marys with a winning record, winning the NFC East. They're able to figure it out. Every other team's able to figure it out if you have a good quarterback. Every team. Why are the Bengals unable to figure it out? I know the defense is bad, and I'm not going to blame Joe Burrow, Because that's maybe where like outside like the Cleveland fans say, well, why doesn't Burrow get? Because I don't blame Burrow for this.
The offense has sucked for 3 straight weeks, though. How does he get no blame?
And that's fair.
If I just think if the play call,
not all the, and to be fair, I'm not saying all the blame.
No, I'm just
we
saying,
don't need to beat up on him, but I'm just saying like.
McKinnon, look at that route tree that Jamar. That was his best wide receiver. He's not going to have a route that runs more than 10 yards down the field.
You could still get him the football.
Sure, they did. They threw it to him 9 completions.
And threw it to him 11 times.
11 times. Yeah. Like they got him involved. It's just for nothing.
But like it can't be like when last week you were saying you were just out on Justin Herbert. You said you were out on him as a quarterback. This is a guy that has not had good OCs at all. He has not had good – he's had good weapons on the roster, but just not healthy. And, like, you see what he's working with this year. Like, you say you're out on him, and you put a lot of blame on him for not being able to make it work with a lot of things that are off around him. Josh Allen, when things started going bad last year, we didn't say, well, Ken Dorsey's the problem. Ken Dorsey, by the way, OC for Cleveland, whatever. We'll get to that in a bit. But we didn't sit there and say, well, Josh Allen, I still think he's a top 2 quarterback, but I think it's just Ken Dorsey that's the problem. No, I feel like we're homering Joe Burrow a bit by not holding him accountable slightly because it's not fair at all when Josh Allen's looking over at Joe Burrow saying, oh, poor Joe Burrow, you can't make it work with Jamar. You think Patrick Mahomes, and by the way, no one feels bad for Patrick Mahomes, but like Patrick Mahomes like laughing at this idea that the Bengals, it's the play calling that they can't figure it out with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. We could say the play calling's a problem, and I agree that I defended Zach early because I said, hey, the offense isn't the problem, the defense is. But the offense has been a problem for going on almost a month now. I think, yes, Zack Taylor, I'm all on board now with questioning him. I think that's beyond fair. But at some point, Joe Burrow averaging 206 yards a game the last 3 games, averaging a touchdown a game the last 3 games. I think that's we can criticize him, and I think it's fair to say, hey, you're playing a role in this too. You made a name for yourself overcoming deficiencies your entire time in Cincinnati, and now we're going to use all the deficiencies or all the roadblocks and say, well, Joe Burrow can't overcome this. I think he's overcome worse, getting sacked 70 times in a season and leading a team to a Super Bowl. I mean, that was magnificent. That was fantastic stuff. I just think this team's still too talented, and I have a hard time giving him the benefit of the doubt when you have weapons. May not be the greatest scheme in the world, but find a way to make it work, and he hasn't been able to the last 3 weeks, even though they're 2-1 in the last 3 weeks, to be fair.
How many top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL don't have a winning record right now? Or don't have a chance at the playoffs?
I think it's a knock on Burrow. That's the problem. There's a chance he could finish in last.
I don't think it's a knock on Burrow because I think Burrow's done what he's been at. I think Burrow has played as good as you can possibly play in this offense that was schemed for children.
The scheme has led them to a Super Bowl and back-to-back AFC championships. The scheme led a backup quarterback to a winning record.
With T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd both in their primes and healthy, with Joe Mixon rushing for 1,200 yards a year, I think Zack Taylor's scheme needs
adjusting.
I
don't want this to be an argument, by the way, because I'm seeing both sides.
I think Zack Taylor's scheme is very good, and I believe in it. If you have 2 elite wide receivers, an elite running back, and a top 5 quarterback with a great defense and an elite kicker.
That's a lot. That's
exactly.
A lot of ifs.
And they had all of that on the Super Bowl run.
Yep.
An elite defense, a kicker that didn't miss, 3 probably top 30 receivers.
Yeah.
And a running back that threw a touchdown in the Super Bowl. He was that good.
I'm still gonna talk about it. They ran the ball 3 times against the Baltimore Ravens after securing a massive turnover. They ran it 3 straight times to settle for a miracle 55-yard field goal. That was their offensive plan. That was the plan. And I don't care if Burrow audibled. Maybe that's on Burrow. I don't care. 3 plays in a row, 3 runs. We don't have faith in the offense to get a first down, maybe get a little bit closer.
How can you keep bringing this up when you don't want to put any blame on Burrow when he audibled to one of those runs?
That was 1 run, though. That's 1 play.
Right. Zack Taylor called a pass, which you asked him to do, and Joe Burrow audibled, and you don't want to put any blame on Joe Burrow?
Correct, but the next 2 plays need to be passes.
I think that's crazy.
I think that's
incredibly crazy, and you're just giving slack to your quarterback.
I think they have to. They have to throw the ball.
You have to put some blame in that 3 plays on Joe Burrow. That's why I don't know why you keep talking about it.
Well, because I think it's a testament to the offense not having any confidence whatsoever. They don't have confidence that they can get first downs. They don't have confidence.
They can't run the football.
They don't have confidence in themselves.
They've consistently, handcuffed themselves by not giving Joe Burrow the ball, which Joe Burrow, like you said, audibled out of that specific drive.
He's had a lot of bad audibles this year.
But again, we come to that 4th down play where we call a screen here yesterday, and it's like, why? Why?
Everyone keeps talking about the screen. I think the third down call was way worse than the screen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
That whole set of sequences after that first down was pretty tough. I think we only gained like a couple yards. Well, I mean, obviously we got 9 yards, but we got like 6-7 yards the first play, and then 2 the next, and then 1, and then we go for it on fourth down and can't convert because we can't get a yard. Like, I don't know, man. It's just like, if you're gonna go for it in this offense, clearly running the ball is not going to get it done. Give Joe Burrow the options to make the right decision. That's all we've asked for all season long, and it just never, ever plays out that way. He never gets the opportunity to prove that he is that dude. Well, and I think that's what's killing me this year, is that they are not giving Joe Burrow the chances to prove that he's the clutch quarterback that we know he can be. Which is why I get scared when we have this conversation about who shares blame where and here, there, whatever. Joe Burrow's audibling out of plays where he was asked to throw the football, to run the ball. Does he have confidence in himself? Does he have issues with that? I don't know. Why is Zack Taylor calling a screenplay to Jamar Chase? Why aren't you giving Joe Burrow the chances to throw the football on fourth down?
Well, let me ask you this. If Joe Burrow has the ability, if we're going to talk about the plays that Joe Burrow has, he's changed up at the line of scrimmage into, if he's going to call an audible into a bad play, Joe Burrow has the power to audible into a good play too. That's some of the other stuff too that I think we let Joe Burrow off the hook. Like we forget how much power Joe Burrow has. It's not like, oh man, I'm Joe Burrow, I really want to do this, but man, Zack Taylor, He wants me to do this. I got to do exactly what Zack Taylor says. This is the guy that told the owner to shove it when the owner told him he didn't want him to play. Like Joe Burrow does what he wants. So if Joe Burrow can audible into a run play, which was a bad decision at that time, he also has the power to audible into a good play. When is Joe Burrow going to utilize that power to audible into good plays? If Joe Burrow thinks that these plays are bad, and he signs off on them and executes them, that means he's signing off on it too. If he has the power to change that play at the line of scrimmage, he needs to do that as well. Now, we're not privy to know what he does and does not check into. The only reason we knew that he checked into that run play a few weeks ago is because theoretically, some viewed it as Zach throwing him under the bus. Like if Zach never said that, would we have known that? We would have, said Zach ran the ball 3 straight times, the play that Elliott was talking about. But
And let's be very clear too. Yesterday, there was only a handful of plays that really went south that we could point at that just completely derailed the game. It was the fourth down, it was the interception, and the fumble. Those are really only 3 plays that just completely killed the day on offense. And unfortunately, 2 of those are turnovers, and one of those directly was a Joe Burrow mistake, interception that he just threw the ball too short, made a good play, the corner slapping the ball up in the air. But it's that fourth down call. Like, out of all the mistakes that this team makes, you can't have coaching be one of the errors. You can't have Joe Burrow missing a guy by just 2 yards be that mistake when you need to play perfect on offense, right? We've had that discussion plenty of times this season, but
they don't know how to, they don't know how to QB sneak.
Yeah, they don't know how to. I don't think
they just don't get it.
Well, thank God we're not QB sneaking. Let's get that out there.
Well,
God bless that we're not running a QB sneak on 4th and 1. Thank the Lord.
Brock Purdy's able to do it.
Brock Purdy doesn't have $55 million a year against the cap. I'm not running Joe Burrow on a quarterback sneak.
Jalen Hurts does.
Jalen Hurts squats 500 pounds. I'm not putting Joe Burrow in a quarterback sneak.
Yeah, but that's not all the tush push is. It's 2 other guys pushing Jalen Hurts into the.
I am very happy that the Bengals are not running quarterback sneaks with Joe Burrow. Very happy.
I just couldn't disagree more. I mean, if you're not going to feel comfortable with Joe Burrow sneaking it, then put someone else in there and just man up. Correct. I kind of agree with Tom on this point. You're asked your lineman to get 1 yard. Get the damn 1 yard, okay? Put someone in there that'll actually get the 1 yard. Quarterback sneak it. Let's be men, right? That's the other thing, too, is like our roster construction is all built around the pass. We can't run the ball. Some of it is scheme-wise, but some of it is also just the linemen can't block. They can't run block. They're not good enough to run block.
I love that. Casey, we're cutting that. Let's be men. Let's get up there and be men. All right, just men being men. All right, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. That was a long segment. So we do have a touch and go that we'll be getting to coming up here shortly. A little insider stuff. Elliot, always with the buzzwords.
Yeah, inside the business.
Yeah. All right, we'll step away for a few moments. We'll take a trip around the AFC North, although there was only one other game technically with two teams in the AFC North that played yesterday, and then the Steelers will be in action tonight. But yeah, my Browns got a win. But why am I pissed about that win? We'll discuss when we come back. All right, we'll spend more time on this Bengals-Eagles result as the week goes on. The thing that's always interesting is Tuesday's reaction to stuff is always a little bit different than Monday's. I think everyone's a little bit more emotional when we start things off on a Monday. It's fresh, it's raw. I know you have to go on right after. It's easy when your team wins to go do those shows right after. But, I mean, you and Kirby and Trace and Craig, you guys just love – feeling pain. Talking about the Reds losing all season, they go live right after, right? The Bengals lose eventually it'll pay off, right? Eventually.
You'd think
eventually.
The wins have sucked, and then the rest of them are losses. There's been no joy.
I think the thing that's most commendable about what Jacob does is he's watching, reacting to the game live, right? And you can just see the emotion and the drain in his face when they start to lose, right? I couldn't do it.
It's actively killing me. Every time I'm shutting down one of those streams, I'm leaving part of my soul in there.
I feel like you're watching a puppy be put down every time.
It's hard.
It's like you're watching the saddest thing ever. You come down on Christmas morning and there's no gifts under your tree. It's that look every time.
No, it's like my parents wrapped the bike and it's all around the spokes and everything, and I unwrap it, it's just a pair of socks.
Yeah.
It's every time. It's the Bengals are going to win this week. Never do.
Gotcha.
Never do. I mean,
their wins have sucked.
17-14-17 offensively in their 3 wins.
Well, I
guess they scored against the Panthers. They scored 34, but the last 3 games, 17-14-17. The offense is non-existent at this point.
Yeah.
We always said coming into the season, we talked about it the whole time through the first couple weeks. What happens when a bad defensive game meets a bad offensive game? Well, we just saw it, and it was about as ugly as it gets.
And that was my concern on Friday when we were analyzing this game. I said I'm not hating, but I fear that this had the potential to be a blowout loss for the Bengals if what we had seen the last 2 weeks came to fruition where, the defense only looked good because they were going up against bad offenses, but the thing that the Eagles had that the Giants and Browns had was a good defense. Joe Burrow and the Bengals were not good against the Browns defense. They weren't good against the Giants defense, but they just ran into very, very bad offenses. We knew the Eagles were not going to be a bad offense, and that's what transpired yesterday. But that's the thing, too. With the Bengals offense, we know how good it could potentially be, but that's the other scary thing. Okay, cool. Win 6-7 games, get in the playoffs, but is this is what you have to look forward to? If every time you play a good team, like the Steelers, by the way, you're not beating the Steelers. Earlier I was like, maybe you split. You're not beating the Steelers twice. If this is how your offense looks against bad or against good defenses, they can't move the football against the Giants, Browns, or the Eagles yesterday outside of that opening drive, and it's I don't get it. They run into a good defense and that offense disappears.
Well, this is where it's and I'm going to go back to what you said towards one of the beginning, how bad the AFC is. It feels like the Bengals are better than half of the AFC. It feels like
from an aesthetic standpoint,
I look at the standings. The AFC East is a disgrace. The New York Jets, the Miami Dolphins, and the New England Patriots, terrible football teams. Terrible. Every single one of them, terrible. The AFC West, the Raiders are terrible. I don't think the Chargers have been very good. They've scored 130 points on the season. The Broncos, I can't talk trash about the Broncos anymore, unfortunately. When you're 5-3, you're 5-3, and I shut up. We know what the Kansas City Chiefs are. The AFC North, home to the Bengals and the Browns. The Steelers are 5-2, but there's not one person in America that thinks the Pittsburgh Steelers can win a Super Bowl. So I think it's right now, and then you have the AFC South again, disgraceful.
You really still don't believe in the Steelers at all?
The Steelers cannot win a Super Bowl.
I think the Steelers could get to an AFC championship.
They can play in the playoffs. They will not win a Super Bowl. 0% chance. I bet my life. I'd bet
your life on minus 1,500, really sticking your neck out there.
But that's the point. That's what I'm saying. You're saying there's no chance.
The Steelers are a very, very good football team.
I think there's 0% chance.
Do you think they can win the AFC North?
No, I do not.
You don't think they can win the AFC? I think they can win the AFC North.
No, I do not. I do not.
You're picking them to win the AFC North, right?
Well, I said if last week what we saw against the Jets, if that offense is not 30 a game, I get that.
Yeah.
But if if Mike Tomlin just gets a solid offense with that defense, I think they're winning the North, because as good as the Ravens offense is, that defense is that bad. That defense is that secondary. That's the whole reason I picked the Browns to win
Really
that
bad.
heading into it, and the whole reason you were all over it to cover is because that secondary is atrocious.
Yeah.
They're bottom 5 in the league. So I think the Ravens are going to be vulnerable to a lot more similar losses that we saw yesterday throughout the season. And I think the Steelers are the most, if Russell Wilson is the guy, and we're going to find out tonight, again, against a bad Giants team. But again, if we've seen Kenny Pickett and others look bad against bad teams, if he goes out and looks good against a bad team, that's a step up, because Justin Fields, unfortunately, wasn't dominating in the passing department like that. Russell Wilson, I think, is key to that. It'll be interesting. But what a wild turn of events, because we all picked the Steelers to not only not make the playoffs, but this would be the year that the 500 streak would snap. It's not. It's going to continue. That we do know for sure. Playoffs or not, winning the division or not, they will finish 500, and that's what's wild. So
I just look at the AFC and I don't see it. I don't see the vision. I see the Kansas City Chiefs. I see the Baltimore Ravens, and that's about it. And the Bills. I see 3 teams. I think the Texans are fine. The Texans with a healthy Joe Mixon can win playoff games, no doubt about it.
Yep. Broncos I'm out on. Miami I don't trust.
Miami's terrible.
The Jets are out. With Tua coming back yesterday, I was like, if the Eagles win and Tua's return yesterday, I think we need to entertain them being back involved. I don't think, what I mean by involved is I think they're going to be heavily in the conversation as the season goes on, but with that loss yesterday, and he played well. By the way, I love lefty QBs. When he did that fake throw and then he did the little flip, I'm like, oh, that was pretty. Lefties are always like
Let me ask you this. Who's been the bigger disappointment so far? The Jets, the Bengals, or the Cowboys? Who's been, do you think, the biggest disappointment?
I don't even think the Cowboys are in that range with the Jets and Bengals. But I think the Bengals are a little bit more disappointing than the Jets, just because you knew this was an opportunity with a 40-year-old quarterback and Salah and how all that went last year and coming off an Achilles. This, at least, you thought of this as a somewhat of a possibility with the Jets.
Yeah.
No one considered this with the Bengals. And I think just with the Cowboys, Mike McCarthy, it's just, all right, we're doing it again. They're going to end 10-7.
I think the Bengals and the Cowboys are the same team right now. I think they're the same exact team. Neither team is a defense.
I think the Cowboys are much worse than the Bengals.
Nobody can run the football. One great elite wide receiver, and you have a quarterback. Obviously, Joe Burrow is significantly better than Dak Prescott. But
Dak stinks.
Dak stinks. But I think that the teams are similar. Other than the fact that the Cowboys do have the best kicker in the NFL. But
it's actually a good comp. I do think the Cowboys are worse. But as far as when you compare their strengths, now Dak has been very, very bad, so that doesn't help. But like Dak, I've never thought he was better than Burrow, but Dak is a very good quarterback. He hasn't been
very good.
But like their weaknesses are the same and their roster makeup's the same. All their money's on their quarterback. The second tier money is going to go to their wide receiver. Micah Parsons is about to get paid for the Cowboys, but outside of that, a lot of question marks and maybe not.
Yeah.
And maybe not, right? And you would assume, Trey Hendrickson. I don't think you marry him long term, as good as he's been. So I think there's a lot of question marks, and they're both similarly built. It's weird. I like that comparison.
I think they're the same team as of right now, until the Bengals show me something different. But yeah, it's been brutal. I mean, there's no way around it. Hopefully next season's better. That's all I can hope for. Jacob said, when we can start talking about the draft, we're there.
Let's go.
We've arrived at draft talk.
Let's go. So I can get started?
Yeah.
All right. I'll start cooking.
Anytime you want, we can start talking about the draft. I will say, Bengals running game, not looking good. I know there's a good running back.
Oh.
Really good running back.
Ooh. If you don't think I already have a Madden franchise with Ashton Jeanty and Stripes, you're so wrong.
I think Jeanty's going to be one of those running backs that you can justify taking in the first round.
I'm just saying.
No, he'll be a high first round.
High in the first round.
I'm just saying.
I think he's a Cowboy, personally.
I'm just saying. But yeah,
well, you saw the guy I want the Bengals to take this week. 150 and 2 touchdowns. Maybe you can lock up a wide receiver 2 in Stripes.
2?
Come on down, Travis Hunter.
Oh, I see. He did play a hell of a game. I don't know if you guys watched that UC football game, but
I would love him here.
I mean, that guy's. If anybody had a doubt about Travis Hunter, you go ahead and watch that game, because that's insane. I have the stats. I think I have the stats here.
It's wild when guys like that play at Ohio State and Alabama. They blend in. It is wild when you watch Colorado. Like, I think I think again, you being around Alabama the way you were watching Ohio State, we see a lot of super talented guys that I'm not saying they don't pop off the field, but they just blend in on the field. He pops off on that damn field because he's playing above everyone else.
But I've heard a lot of people say that, how he wouldn't pop like this if he wasn't at Colorado, if he was playing.
You think he would?
We have never seen this before. This happening anywhere at any level would get the same amount of recognition it's getting right now because it's that amazing.
Travis Hunter.
I actually think it's starting to get talked about not enough.
No, yeah.
I think it's getting Travis Hunter played 112 snaps this week. All right. No! This is incredible.
Travis Hunter had played 132 snaps. He played 132 snaps against the Bearcats. 61, all of them on defense. He played all the possible snaps on defense you could play. He played them. 68 of 71 on offense. He missed 3 snaps in that game. He had 153 receiving yards, career high. 5th 100-yard receiving performance this season. 4 pass breakups, that's a career high. He had 2 touchdowns.
Both offensive, right?
Correct.
Okay. Still, crazy that we have to ask that.
You have to mention it.
We have to ask that.
That's how good that guy is.
Yeah.
So if we're able to get Travis Hunter, woo.
We legitimately have to lose out.
That's fine. We'll lose out. I'll lose out for Travis Hunter. What are you going to win this year? You're not winning
I would
anything this year.
absolutely lose out for Travis Hunter.
I got a question. If the Bengals played the Lions, what does that game look like this season? Colton kind of brought it up in the chat. Jared Goff threw for 80 yards in their 52-point victory yesterday against the Titans. Do you think he throws more than 6 times? I think what happens is you just have Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs just run each 45 times.
How do you put 50 points up and he barely threw for any yards yesterday?
It's the most preposterous graphic I've ever seen.
I kept going through that box score. I'm like, none of this is making sense.
There's a graph, and it's yards in the game, points scored in the game. And it's every game since 2000. And the Lions dot on said graph is so far away from everyone else that it's insane. I mean, that game statistically makes no sense with how they were able to put up that many points with that little yards.
David Montgomery's tossing touchdowns.
Yeah.
By the way, real quick, we're kind of fading away off this Bengals talk.
I want him.
How about – go ahead.
I want Ben.
You want him?
I mean, you see David Montgomery throw that touchdown?
Let's see.
I want Ben. Oh, Ben. I did a little – Bengals ripped my heart out right about, 4:30 p.m.?
Yeah.
Get done with the postgame show about 5. Hopped in my car. There are some really nice properties available for sale in the Hyde Park area.
Yeah.
Down towards Madeira. I think Ben Johnson would love raising a family there. Him and his wife. Great school district. Wonderful new sports media department over there at that public high school. So maybe Ben Johnson, his wife, and his kids can come down, tour the facilities, and fall in love with Cincinnati. That'd be great.
It would be fantastic.
That was my takeaway from the Lions game.
Yeah.
And as it should be at this point, nonetheless. All right, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll step away for a few moments. Final radio segment coming up on the other side. AFC North Roundup. Browns over the Ravens. Steelers have the Giants tonight. Will they come out on top? We'll talk about that as well. We'll be right back.
I think we have 2 more.
Casey called an audible. I was running when we should have been passing. My bad, Casey. My bad.
You're good.
Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. We appreciate everyone who's tuning in right now and hanging out with us. If you could do us a favor, please give the stream a like. We started this earlier this morning with Dialed In and Tom Brenneman and Luke and Jacob in the producer chair. Casey back in the producer chair for Off the Bench today. But, yeah, we've been reacting to a wild Week 8 in the National Football League, a 37-17 loss. Bengals against the Eagles yesterday. We'll talk more about the Bengals throughout the week, obviously. But we appreciate everyone tuning in. Please like. I really appreciate it. Mouse Cop, I really don't care about your opinion of me. If I cared about it, I would have quit a long time ago. So keep yapping. I really don't care. But just like it. I know you don't like me. I know you don't like me, and that's totally fine. But just like the chat for these guys, please. That's all I ask. If you ever do anything that I ask, just do this one. Just like. That's all.
And Mouse Cop's a Browns fan, which is why your two consistent rivalry is such a shock to me.
So shocking.
I feel like you guys should get along.
So shocking. Maybe one day. No.
Maybe one day. Probably
No.
not. I'd wager against.
Yeah, so you mentioned, look, the Browns over the Ravens. I'm watching that yesterday, and I'm getting angrier and angrier. Oh, nice throw. Ooh, nice catch. Ooh, big stop. Big win. What the hell was that?
It's almost like everybody in the world said to do this. It's almost like everybody, including myself, said that things would look a little bit different when they had a guy that they respected. And you might make fun of it, but you can't look at that win over the Ravens and say anything other than that. They legitimately played to the best of their abilities under the guy that they actually like. 1,000,000%. I did think Jameis was going to blow it at the end when he threw that horrible pass.
He almost
Whatever
did.
that was trash.
He tried to.
But without question, like if the Brown and you already said it earlier in the show, but if the Browns put in him instead of DTR against the Bengals, they win that game by 2 scores. They win the game by 2 scores.
So I think 2 things can be true. Obviously, they look way better with Jameis at quarterback than Deshaun. To be fair, I'd been calling to make that quarterback change a long, long time
True.
ago. I disagree. The whole argument that you and I got in about this was that I at the time said that they can make the quarterback change, but I don't think it's going to make as drastic of a difference as you think when they had receivers dropping balls. They were one of the league leaders in penalties. The defense was not playing well at the time. And maybe the team looked as good as they did yesterday because, I don't know, for the first time all season, you have your whole offensive line back. Week 2 of getting Nick Chubb back. Finally, back-to-back games where you have David Njoku out there. Finally games where you're not committing penalties. I don't think you have guys that say, man, I'm going to jump off sides because I hate Deshaun Watson. I don't think you have got. I also think you have a true number 1 wide receiver in Cedric Tillman now. Huge fan of his when they drafted him. I was bummed that it had not been working out. He gets the route trees that Amari Cooper had been running, and I think he's maximized those. And, I think addition by subtraction, moving on from Amari Cooper, how's he helping old Josh Allen? What did he have yesterday? 3 targets, 1 catch for 3 yards. I believe that there was a refreshed energy in that locker room. They also played an energized game yesterday as well. Jameis going out there, no doubt. But Jimmy Donovan, the longtime beloved voice of the Cleveland Browns, passed away tragically over the weekend. Lost his battle with cancer. That entire franchise united and came together. I mean, when we talk beloved, I think every team loves their media guys, no doubt. But he was a beloved figure that had been battling cancer for a while. There was just a different energy and a different buzz in that stadium from every report that came out. They were wanting to win that one for Jimmy. They get that big win yesterday, yes. I think both sides could be true. They play better because Jameis is out there. But you just saw the best players on the roster literally getting in fights with the fan base because the fan base was attacking the guy that everyone says that they hate. I don't think that locker room hates Deshaun as much as everyone wants to believe. But I do think that the locker room is happy that Deshaun's not the quarterback. I do believe that is the case. But yes, it is, at the end of the day, they go up, put more than 20 on the board for the first time. They beat the Baltimore Ravens. That defense is legit. Nick Chubb in that run game finally, again, not cooking at full speed yet, but I think that's back. You finally start to see Njoku get involved in the offense the last couple of weeks. And Tillman, I think, is going to be a star. I think Cleveland finally has a receiver that they've drafted that's going to be really good. I'm not overreacting just to yesterday's game. We saw it last week when he started to get the Amari Cooper route tree and the Amari Cooper looks. It's a completely different look offensively. But the reason I'm pissed is because you sat on this all season. You watched Deshaun, and here's the thing. Stefanski may not have all the power. My only bad thing I'll say about Stefanski, because I think he can go to Philadelphia and win a Super Bowl with that roster like that. I think Stefanski's that good. My problem with Stefanski, and maybe it wasn't on him, you put DTR at halftime last week. DTR was named the second-string quarterback heading into that matchup with the Bengals last week. And if he wasn't hurt, DTR would have started against the Ravens and they would have lost yesterday. Are they trying to lose? Because you can't tell me, and we could say, well, they need to see what they have with DTR. So what do you see at practice? What do you see at practice? Well, and that's the thing that drives me absolutely wild is that if it wasn't for Deshaun getting hurt and it wasn't for DTR getting hurt, they don't win that football game yesterday. And if it wasn't for Deshaun, Deshaun gets hurt, I don't know if they beat Cincinnati if Deshaun doesn't get hurt last week. I know he was playing well. They still weren't putting points up on the board. But I do know this. You put Jameis in at halftime, they beat Cincinnati last week. And then we're talking about back-to-back wins, and then we're talking about a team that's right back in the playoff hunt. I'm not talking about them in the playoffs. I know mathematically it's not that far-fetched for them to get back in it. But for them to get back in it, that means you can't lose the rest of the way. They're not winning out. They're just not. They shouldn't have won that game yesterday. That wasn't just a bad throw. That wasn't an interception that by some football god knocked it out of his hands. It was in his hands, and then it wasn't.
It was in his hands like
again.
3 times.
It was in his hands, yes. It was in his hands not once, not twice, but 3 times. And again, it was just a wild game. It was such a crazy finish. good for Cleveland, good for the Browns. I'm happy they got the win by all means, but it's like you can't look at that coaching staff and say, oh, good for them. They finally have their quarterback. You had your quarterback. I'd like to assume that upper management was pressuring him not to play him. But you decided to make DTR the guy last week. That loss last week is on Kevin Stefanski. All the other ones I'll put on the ownership and Deshaun. Last week's loss is on Kevin Stefanski for going to DTR. That's the problem I have. I'm not trolling. They beat the Bengals if he's the quarterback.
I agree. I mean, what did they do when Jameis Winston had one drive against the Bengals?
They beat him by 2.
They drove down and scored.
They beat him by 2 scores.
Yeah.
They beat the Bengals by 2 scores if Jameis plays.
How old is Jameis?
The Brown. I don't know.
Are you thinking long-term quarterback?
Not long-term, but I
short
think
long-term?
Short long-term in this window.
Like
Don't waste time.
little bitty
Cousins.
extension, little 3-year extension.
Kirk Cousins.
Little
deal.
well, not four.
Not- I wouldn't-
not
wouldn't
40.
say that.
Not the
4-year,
money.
170.
Not the money. Not the money. The years.
Jameis is 30.
You can get 3 years out of him.
I think
with
it's
this
3 year
defense
with a
and try to
team
go all
plus,
in
3
on
plus 1 or something like that.
But
Yeah, the Browns have a winning record if they play Jameis Winston this year. That's a fact.
And Jameis is fun.
I was annoyed with him in the pregame.
Come on.
No, here's
that's
why.
part of it. That's part of
That
it.
is
You
part
have
of the
to, you have to
experience.
open
You
your
have to
heart.
be in or out.
You have to open your heart to Jameis.
They asked him about the matchup with the
He's
defense,
weird.
and he said, "This is a day that God has given me. I will
I
rejoice
will
in it."
Rejoice and be glad.
Thank you.
I saw a
Thank
tweet
you,
that
Jameis.
said all his interviews look like auditions for a movie that doesn't exist. Like
Yeah.
he's always like auditioning for some role that just doesn't exist. But keep in mind, and I am consistent with it. You act like that on a 1-5 team, 1-6 team. That's the problem I had. But you went out and you didn't Steeler it up or Browns it up. You weren't just the quarterback of a team that won. You are the reason they won. Act as weird as you want now. I don't care. I'm just saying at the time I saw that and I'm like, will you stop? Cleveland's a laughing stock and you're doing weird stuff like this. What if you go out and throw 2 interceptions and 125 yards and you get beat by 20 plus points? Now we look even stupider. At that time, that I'm just taking you to where my mindset was. But eat the W's, talk about Eminem, do whatever you got to do.
That white boy from Detroit.
That's right.
That white boy from
They won't win out. They won't make the playoffs. They've done too far. They've done the damage. It's over. But they can still win 7 games. They can win maybe 8 games if they get real hot. But I think around 7 games is what they'll have. At that point, Deshaun cannot play next season, right?
No, I don't want to ever see him pick up a football in Cleveland again.
Well, I'm just saying, like when he comes back and halfway through that season next year, or what 4 games into the season next season, there's no chance, right? No chance.
And by the way, Cleveland, who has had a lot of
I would have said that last year.
Yeah.
Cleveland's had a lot of bad luck. You might have found a get out of jail free card. You got it with Flacco, and you ruined that. And you might have got it again with Jameis.
Could you
can't
imagine
move on back-to-back years off of quarterbacks that have proven that like Cleveland finally has weapons to win with, and you're choosing to let it go. That would be a revolting.
What if they
I was
put
gonna say,
DTR in when he gets healthy?
Oh, that would be
What'd you
worse.
What if they put DTR in when he gets healthy?
I'll
Jameis
Houday
2-0.
that. I will turn on my team. I will turn
That
on
would
them.
be bad.
DTR's tanking?
Yeah, and
What helps
by the way,
Browns more?
do you agree DTR starts yesterday if that injury doesn't happen?
Oh, no question about it.
And they lose.
I think he will start this season for the Browns. DTR. They will start him this season. It is beneficial for the Cleveland Browns franchise to lose these games. And Jameis Winston gives you too good of a shot at winning them.
The AFC was wild yesterday, though, because, again, we talked about with the Colts and the Jets and the Dolphins and the Bengals and all these teams losing, 2-6 is a stupid record. But you look at it, the Bengals have 1 more win than you do. The Dolphins have 2 more wins than you do. All right, the Colts have 2 more wins than you do. The Broncos are sitting at 5-3. The Broncos are not making the playoffs. They're going to come down to earth. Like, all these teams ahead of them, they're going to close the gap if they stick with Jameis because that defense is just too damn good. That defense is good, and Chubb's going to get better. And Tillman, I really am a fan of Tillman. I'm a big Tillman
He was
guy.
a special player at Tennessee, and everyone overlooked him because of Jalen Hyatt's here.
And I was mad when the Browns missed out on him. Now I'm not.
Jalen Hyatt stinks.
The Giants
and I
traded
said
up.
that at
Cleveland
the
was
time.
going to take Hyatt, and the Giants traded up to get him, and then that's how they ended up with Tillman.
Yeah, you got
It
the better
worked out.
receiver.
It worked out.
I got a couple fun stats from yesterday.
Let's go.
We'll go with the 4-4 Colts.
There we go.
The 4-4 Colts. Anthony Richardson ranks 222nd in completion rate, 50%, among the 225 quarterbacks with 250 dropbacks since the year 2000. So quarterbacks who've dropped back 250 times since the year 2000, he ranks 222 out of 225. The 3 quarterbacks below him. Anybody want to take a guess at these names?
Okay.
I'll tell you. Tim Tebow at 223.
That's good.
Mike McMahon at 224. Akili Smith, 225.
Our guy.
Those are the only 3 quarterbacks that have a worse completion percentage with 250-plus dropbacks since the year 2000. The New York Jets, I got a fun Jet stat as well. The New York Jets had 0 turnovers yesterday, held the Patriots to 247 yards. They still lost. They're the first team to lose a game in which they did not turn it over and hold their opponent to 250 yards since week 3 of 2012.
Ooh.
Who was it in 2012? Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. They lost 14-12 to the Seahawks in the Fail Mary game.
Wow.
That was the last time. Since that game, teams to do this exact same thing, hold your team to 200 to under 250 and have 0 turnovers. They were 220-0.
That's big time.
The New York Jets are bad, and that's a disgrace.
They're really bad.
Aaron Rodgers, bad, really bad. How many more Aaron Rodgers friends does it take to build a losing franchise?
I think they might have a couple more out there.
Randall Cobb's out there somewhere. He's got a Jordy Nelson is still young.
Well, Jordy Nelson is the guy that signs the fine letters.
Really?
Like he's the Players Association. Jordy Nelson's signature's on the bottom of the fine letters.
Is he really?
Yeah, I saw that the other day.
How about that?
We do have breaking news, not NFL related, but still football related, college football breaking news. Curtis Rourke has continued throwing the past few days, Indiana's quarterback, and there is serious optimism that he will play this Saturday against Michigan State. Curtis Rourke had surgery on his throwing hand on his thumb last week. Indiana 8-0, able to win 2 games without him, with their backup quarterback, Taven Jackson, still staying undefeated. They go to Ohio State to face the Buckeyes in a couple weeks. Rourke coming back for this week, maybe against Michigan State, but certainly looking like he'll be back for that showdown in the shoe. That's a game that has me really nervous.
All right, well, we're wrapping up the radio portion. I want to stick with that. I do want to transition over to college because it's been a depressing Monday. I mean, I'm happy my team won, but I don't know what they won, really. And by the way, if you beat the Eagles, you should have been happy about the Browns win yesterday, too. Like that
Browns win made the Eagles' loss hurt 50 times more.
Yeah.
Because we would have been right back in it.
Right back in it. But, all right, that wraps it up on the radio side. Radio in Dayton, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton, the Jocelyn Kinder Show coming up next. But we're going to talk a little college football here, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench. I'm all in on Indiana. Not all in like national championship, but I actually do think that I don't think they could beat Ohio State, but I do think that we are going to feel really dirty after beating Indiana in a few weeks when it's an ugly win. And it won't be ugly. It's going to feel ugly. I think Indiana's really damn good. Put it this way. There's a lot of teams. You can't, like, good teams, Ohio State, Alabama, others, you can lose your starting quarterback and go win a football game. Indiana can't, and they did. That's why I believe in them. Like, I'm not acting like, oh, my God, they beat Washington. They beat Washington with a backup quarterback. At Indiana, you don't have 3 starting quarterbacks on your depth chart, like Ohio State, Alabama, and others. Obviously, at Alabama and Ohio State with these quarterbacks, like, their starters better than the guys behind them, but the guys behind them would be starters at pretty much your Purdue's and your Indianas of the world, this, that, and the other. Cincinnati, I'm a huge fan of. He kind of weirded me out at first. Thought he was a little different, but every time I hear him talk, every time I see him on the Pat McAfee show, every time I just listen to him talk about football in general, I'm like, I want to run through a brick wall for this dude. This guy's freaking sweet.
Yeah, he rocks.
I think Indiana's pretty damn good. Like I said, Rourke is a very, very good quarterback, and it's not like they missed him out there. They didn't look as explosive without him, but there was still enough explosiveness there that they went and took care of business against Washington, and now he's coming back potentially against Michigan State. I think there's a good chance. There's a 90% chance they're undefeated heading into the shoe here in a few weeks.
Higher than that. Yeah.
This team's legit. I'm all in. I wasn't all in at first. I was like, all right, we could stop. There's a story. Let's stop. No, I think they're legit.
They're up over 70% to make the playoff now. They're virtually a playoff lock when it comes to odds and where we're putting everything else. And we were buying and selling that a couple weeks ago. There's really no excuse for them finishing any worse than 11-1 as you look at their schedule the rest of the way. They're massive favorites over Michigan State this week. I guess just a touchdown, but I guess that's the question mark about Rourke. If you're a touchdown favorite with your backup quarterback on the road in conference, that's a pretty big favorite. Then you have Michigan in between at home in Indiana, and then you go to Ohio State, and then you have Purdue. They're going to be big-time favorites in all 3 of those non-Buckeye games. And if they take care of business, they'll be in regardless of how that Ohio State outcome goes, which is a massive thing for that program. And Indiana's obviously a Big Ten team. They have a large NIL fund. They do a good job and certainly have the funds to pay a guy like Cignetti to stay long term. But I don't know how long of leashes programs are going to give their coaches in the 12-team playoff. I think a lot of people thought originally that it would extend the leash of coaches, and if you make the 12-team playoff, it's just like, oh, here's your cookie. You lose in the first round. That's great. We'll just do it again next year. Maybe we have a chance. I think it's going to be the exact opposite. I think you're going to have teams that if you don't win in the first round, you're out, even if you made it. It doesn't matter. Teams are much more fickle with the coaches, especially if you miss a 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
A lot of times you would give your coach a little bit of wiggle room after missing a 14 playoff and say, okay, well, maybe it was just a bad year. We'll go next year. I think if you miss a 12-team playoff, the coach is gone. So Cignetti, after just one great year turning around Indiana, if I'm an Indiana fan, the thing I'm thinking about right now, holy cow, I hope we can keep him around.
Yeah.
And it's just such a tough place to be as a non top shelf program to get a coach like this who's been dominant every stop he goes. Hopefully they're enjoying it. Hopefully they're soaking in an 8-0 season with some great quarterback play, an electric offense, really, really special players on both sides of the ball, and a coach that town has really bought into. I mean, the rally towels. How many rally towels have you seen in a top 15 program in SEC or in college football that are about the coach?
Yeah.
Not players, not mascots, coach. That's awesome. They're really buying into this guy's mantra and everything he's about, which I think is able to be seen on the field. I mean, these players are doing everything that is asked of them. They're doing exactly what he's coaching them to do, and that's exactly what he did at Elon and exactly what he did at James Madison. He just took it right up to Indiana. He's an incredible coach, and it's important to give credit to all the players, and I think people are doing that. But Curt Cignetti is the one that's turned this program around, and he's been incredible.
So last year at James Madison, they started out 8-0. And then this year, 8-0. I think I read this right. He's the first coach ever to lead back-to-back. He's the first coach to take two different Division I teams and lead them to 8-0 seasons back-to-back right off the bat. Like usually, if you're at a team like James Madison, you go to an Indiana and you win, 8 or 9 games, and you start to see that trajectory, and then you feel good. But no, he's come in and made an immediate impact. And I think it's Cignetti, it's guys like him in Indiana that make the Ohio States and the other programs uncomfortable and get impatient because it's like, hold on, this cat can come in here out of nowhere and make Indiana a playoff team. And when you, Ryan Day, with all this talent, with all the resources, with everything, and we're biting our nails wondering if you can get in. I've never been a big Fire Ryan Day guy, but I am admitting or at least acknowledging I could see that the boiling pot of water underneath that seat of his right now.
If Curt Cignetti goes into the shoe and beats Ohio State, he might as well just not leave Columbus. I mean, we'll just go ahead and put Ryan Day on the bus. He can coach the Hoosiers. Sig, there's your office. It's all set up. Got some good pieces on the offensive side of the ball for you. Let's run.
You speaking of Ryan Day, you guys out on Ryan Day yet?
No, not at all.
Not yet?
Not at all.
You getting a little frustrated, though?
Here's why I'm getting there more than you.
A little frustrated?
I like Ryan Day.
He's not losing games. He's losing the games that matter, and he's winning the games that he should. But the losing that I'm talking about, that I'm starting to hear rumblings of, he's starting to lose a locker room.
That's what the defense.
That's where I'm starting to question Ryan Day from that standpoint. I listen to a lot of Buckeye podcasts like Zach Boren and guys like that. We're starting to question, like, just look at the body language on the sideline. Yeah. There's no excitement. By the way, the shoe, atmosphere-wise, I don't know where you're at with this. I think we might have talked about this before. Buckeye fans get mad at me. I think it's one of the worst, for as elite as they are, it's one of the worst college football game day experiences out there. I don't care what anybody says. Like, it's not a bad one by any means, but when we're talking about the Tennessees and the Bamas and the Ole Misses and the SEC schools over there, like, that place was silent. Now, Ohio State wasn't giving him anything to cheer about this past weekend, but my goodness, I guess I could forgive him not looking sharp against Nebraska, Jake, just because, like, you're going to have those weeks, but it's because you're coming off a bye week. And you're coming off a loss, an emotional loss against Oregon. You should have just been drooling, just to get back out on that football field. And it felt like a trap game. But I don't know if some of the problems that we saw, I don't know if those are trap game related. I think that's deficiency related with Ohio State, and especially on that defensive side of the ball. They're soft up front. Ryan Day got mad when Lou Holtz questioned the toughness of that football team. He got defensive when Harbaugh and Michigan would question the toughness of the Ohio State program. I don't think it's right to get mad at anyone questioning that. I'm questioning it. You're soft in the spot of the ball that matters most. You're in the trenches. That's my concern for Ohio State. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not worried about the Penn State game. I don't know why. I don't care. I think James Franklin, Penn State's overrated every single season. Well, I think they're rated too high this year.
It's not even the Penn State part of it as I don't think Drew Aller's good, and he's also not going to be playing. So
Well,
and
now I'm concerned.
Their backup quarterback's in, who if he couldn't beat Drew Aller out in the first place, what am I supposed to be worried about? So maybe I'll look like an idiot again, like I did talking about the Eagles before this game. But I think Ohio State's going to go in and take care of business against Penn State this weekend. The game I'm really, really concerned about is Indiana.
Yeah, last thing on this too. The problem that it looks bad for Ryan Day in Ohio State. Yes, you're coming off a bye week to prepare for Nebraska. Nebraska's improved. Rule's a good coach.
Outside of that Indiana game, they're a top 10 offense in the country.
Like it's a good team. I get that, but I also just watched Indiana, who a lot of Buckeye fans try to discredit the success of Indiana. There's just a lot of moving parts that made this bad on Saturday. Indiana made Nebraska look pedestrian in less than that a week ago. Ohio State was off last Saturday, so that means they had 2 weeks to prepare for this team that just got trounced by Indiana. You're coming off of a loss against Oregon, and you're trying to convince people that, hey, why are you mad at us? We lost against the number one team, undefeated number one team in the country on the road at night by 1 possession. We're still championship contenders. Nobody feels that way right now. Well, maybe you know what I mean. Like, Buckeye fans feel very, very concerned about this situation when it comes to this.
And I think that does stem back to Ryan Day and that 1-7 record against ranked teams, because what do you have to do in order to win a national championship?
Yeah.
Beat 3 or 4 top 5 teams. So we'll definitely see how it goes. I think it's going to be interesting to watch how this Penn State narrative forms as we progress, because they're a top 5 team, and I firmly believe Ohio State's going to go in there and get the win. And when they do, everyone's going to say, oh, it's Penn State. They're never really that legit. That doesn't count as a top 5 win.
Yeah.
And it'll be, oh, who cares that it was at Happy Valley? Their quarterback was banged up the week before. Doesn't count. And so we're just going to continue to move the goalposts on Ryan Day. The only thing that he can do in order to shut everyone up is win a national championship. And we won't know whether or not he can do that until January. So I'm reserving my Ryan Day judgment until November, and then after November until January. But There's 2 Fire Ryan Day points for me this year, and it's Michigan and national championship.
Moving on to baseball real quick as we wrap things up here shortly. But
your team.
You see my
teams.
Team.
His teams.
Both your teams playing hard, playing fast.
Kenner's going to win this championship one way or the other.
It's a win for baseball.
That's right.
At the end of the day, it is a win. I mean, it is wild. I don't know the last time I watched a World Series where I felt like, man, we're watching like superstars like all over the place. That's a win for baseball, big picture when it's all said and done. But yeah, the message of just, will the Reds be here next year? Probably not. I don't, But no, they had the Joe Nuxall. They had a banquet over the weekend. Marty Brenneman was speaking at it. And his wife Amanda had shared a post on Facebook that her and Terry Francona worked out a way to surprise Marty up on stage. I should have sent it. But Francona pops up on stage, scares the hell out of Marty, and he gives him a big old hug. They embrace. And again, Terry just wanted to be a part of this banquet because he knew how much, obviously Joe Nuxall meant to the organization, to the community, and already just embracing himself in everything Reds. But he opened up the speech with saying, everyone started clapping and cheering for him. He goes, all right, everyone relax. He goes, I need everyone to remember this energy come April when I make that pitching change you don't like. Right off the bat. But yes, give me any Terry Francona content, just keep it coming. That's all I care about. One thing we didn't talk about last week, we now know a couple of the coaches that are on the staff now. He went and plucked the hitting coach from the Guardians. How are we feeling about that?
Chris Valleca, yeah, I like him. It's a former Red. I think he's had success in Cleveland, so bring him home. Clearly, the bats of the Reds last year were the downfall of the team. They were terrible from the start to the finish. And getting a new voice, I don't know really what a hitting coach does. If I'm going to be honest, this is where I'm a baseball fan. I love the sport. I don't know how much of those coaches really matter if you don't have the talent. You know what I'm saying?
Ellie has his own personal hitting coach.
Sure,
some of these guys do, don't they?
Is Chris Valleca gonna get Stu to
hire Ellie's guy? Apparently,
is he gonna get Stu to hit big home runs? Is he gonna get Stu to get or hit better against right-handed pitching? I don't know. I don't know what that role is. But the good news is they're making changes. Clearly, something wasn't working with the old staff. That was evident, and now you're making changes, and you're gonna try to win games a different way, and I think that's all we could ask for as Reds fans. I don't know. You still need major upgrades. I mean, you need upgrades all around that roster. And if you do that, then yeah, I'll be all in on this signing. But this signing to me is whatever.
I'm not going to sit here and act like I have a bunch of Chris Valleca stats in my brain. No. But really the way I operate when you hire a hitting coach from another team is go immediately to their page and see if they're crushed about it. Guardians fans, ecstatic. So not the best sign, at least in my opinion.
Damn.
Ecstatic that Blake is gone.
One number I keep seeing that's pushed for this, and again, I'm kind of with you, Elliot. I don't really know what to make of this. Now, I used to be like this with football. I never really cared about coordinators. Now that's your life. Like that's the lifeline right there. You could be a bad head coach and your coordinators bail you out, and that's college, NFL, this, that, and the other. But with this, I don't really know what to make of it because – so I guess with him, the Guardians, before he was there, they were one of the league leaders in strikeouts. In the last 2 years, they've been near the very bottom in strikeout percentage. That's what everyone's talking about because the Reds are right up there at the top in strikeout percentage, this, that, and the other. So I'm like, okay, he comes in, he improves that. Great. So if we're lining out instead of striking out, I mean, is that better? I mean, I guess putting the ball in play is better than not putting the ball in play. I don't know really what to make of that. Well, I think that this team, if they are a better hitting team next year, how much of that is because you're healthier and you added talent versus, you know what I mean, adding a new hitting coach? I don't know.
One of the Terry Francona quotes that kind of went viral on Twitter was that that at some point, like striking out. Again, this is not a direct quote, but it was basically at some point striking out isn't going to be. At some point, it became accepted. At some point, striking out became accepted, and basically, people were like, "Yeah, finally, we're going to eliminate the strikeouts. Nobody's going to strike out anymore." Elliot De La Cruz strikes out a lot. That's who he is. That's what he is. And he gets through that you're able to overlook that because of what he can do on the field, on the base path, and with his power. You're able to overlook that stuff. Same thing with Matt McClain. Matt McClain strikes out a lot. You're not going to just stop these guys from striking out. It's who they are. It's who they've been for their entire baseball careers. They don't just stop striking out because Chris Valleca came to town. But here's the good news is that maybe you can just try your best to reduce it. And even a little bit of reduction, like Elliot De La Cruz progressed in a way that I didn't think was even possible this year. At every facet of the game, he got better this season. And that includes the strikeout numbers. That includes the walk rate. That includes everything. His at-bats were better. So I think as long as we just keep seeing a little bit of progression, I don't need to wipe out all our strikeouts. Like, we can't have Will Benson striking out 45% of the time. But as long as every player is getting a little bit better, then I'll be happy.
It's kind of like this. So the Reds, one of the league leaders in strikeouts. Well, you have a kind of a shitty roster, and you also have a roster with the players that are good. They're first and second year guys in the league. Yeah. So next year, when you have less shitty guys on the roster, and when you have the guys that are now in their third year at the major leagues, now. How much of that is, their strikeout numbers have dropped. Man, it's a good thing they went and got that new hitting coach. Or maybe it's because it's the third year in the league and the ball, is coming off the fingers different. Like,
it's almost like, holy cow, Zack Taylor figured it out. Just also drafted Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
I mean, right.
Time is a flat circle in Cincinnati because how long did we sit here with the Reds clearly out of it and say, hey, the NL's having their worst year ever. Maybe we can sneak in at the end if we get lucky. And we're doing the same thing in the AFC with the Bengals. It's a flat circle of pain and suffering.
It just never ends.
So, yeah. But that's and again, and that's a great point too. That's how we judge to go check the other fan base and see how if they're crushed that you stole our hitting coach, this, that. It's kind of like how we judge the Bearcats hiring.
Yeah, exactly.
With their football coach. You go look at Louisville, they were ecstatic that they lost their head coach. So thank goodness, take them. Now, the guy's done a good job this year, obviously, but nonetheless. But no, that's the only baseball stuff. Have Game 3 of the World Series coming up. What's that?
Have you been watching, or have you stuck to your word?
Have I been watching the World Series? Yeah. Absolutely not. I did watch the Freddie Freeman home run. I mean, I watched it was on. I was at somebody's house and it was on.
I've been a liar.
You didn't walk out of the house?
They made a liar out of me.
Yeah. Okay.
I've been watching it. It's been good. It's been fun to watch.
It feels like LA.
It feels
like
big
the Yankees.
Time. It does.
That was my point earlier about this. Is I've tuned into World Series in the past, even with Houston, with having like Altuve and stars. I'm like, it's the World Series. It just didn't feel big time. I know people hate to hear this, and I'm glad you said it too. Yankees, Dodgers, star player up at bat every time, big name pitchers out there. The managers are it just feels like baseball needed this. This is a huge win for baseball. It feels like you're watching the two best teams.
And I sat here last year and hip hip parade Rangers, Diamondbacks, and said that's great for baseball. That's why I want to see more of this. I don't watch that.
Yeah.
I don't give a damn about the Diamondbacks.
I just don't.
It's annoying.
When I have nothing to root for, I don't watch sports. And when you have the best of the best, I'm not cheering for. I need to cheer for an underdog. That's what I have to cheer for. I do have something else. I kind of DM'd it to Casey. I don't know if you guys saw this. This will be the cherry on top, by the way, the UDF cherry on top.
I also DM'd Casey something for the cherry on top.
Okay, then we have two cherry on tops. I don't know if you guys saw this, but one of the greatest basketball players of our generation, Dwayne Wade.
Oh my.
He got a statue.
I thought you were going to finish. So I didn't.
No, I thought you were.
Dwayne Wade got a statue. So I don't.
Did you see the statue?
It's on screen.
The statue designers did a post-game interview.
I did.
That was awesome.
Yeah, they tried their best to mold it with their hands.
I mean, that sucker. That sucker.
So again, this is not like so. This somebody made a joke.
This is
picture.
a Photoshop.
Correct, but that is what the face of the statue looks
yes.
like. This was like a Photoshop, a joke of what Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade's wedding looked like. And there was a picture of Dwayne Wade and I believe his son. They just are looking at it, laughing. Like that. That's the best you could come up with. That face.
Really bad.
I feel like your other one.
I feel like we've been on a stretch now of
bad statues.
Yeah.
So keep going.
No, you're good.
No, with that, I've interviewed before. His name is Tom Tashia. He is the guy that is responsible for all of the statues outside at Great American Ballpark. And remember, I did my show one time at the Reds Hall of Fame Museum, and we had Tom Tashia on, and he was walking me through just the amount of detail and the time that he spends with the guy. Like Johnny Bench, he spent a ton of time with him. Joe Morgan, Pete Rose. They spent a lot of time collaborating, making sure that every detail of that statue, because he said, like, this is supposed to emulate their greatness. This is a tribute to their greatness. Like, some guys get honored with a jersey retirement. Some get honored with being put in the Ring of Honor or the Hall of Fame or whatever your team circle of champions is, this, that, and the other. He goes, but a statue is just something that is reserved for the special of the special. And when you are going to build that statue, there's a lot of responsibility there that when people see that, they want, like right now we're talking about that statue for all the wrong reasons. Tom Tashia literally said there's not one aspect about any of the statues outside of Great American Ballpark that has not been approved by the talent that he has made them for. And he said he takes great pride in that. He goes, because he wants us to all like it, but he goes, if we all like it and the talent doesn't like it, he's failed at his job. This guy failed at his damn job. That is embarrassing. Like, I feel bad for Dwayne Wade. Like, that doesn't look anything like him.
Not even remotely.
And now they're cutting that out, and they're finding all these like famous pictures of Dwayne Wade, his wedding picture, and they're just taking the head of the statue and plastering it on there.
Not great.
But shout out to Tom Tashia. Does a great job with the red statues outside of GABP.
They did have the statue makers do a little post-game interview, though, so they got slammed for it.
It was a very funny interview.
They were asking, like, why is it so bad? They're just
what was their response?
They said it's very hard to mimic a human face with human hands, and they were committed to doing the statue with human hands. They didn't want to use a ton of machinery, and I was like, I'd rather just use machinery.
Probably should use machinery,
and just get it right.
Yeah. Did you ask, like I said with the Tashia thing, and by the way, and Tashia, just to be clear, hand molds everything, just so they're full of crap. They need to give Tom a call. They need to give Mr. Tashia a call as far as that goes.
That's not the only cherry on top we have. We have a second one.
Here we go.
Casey has it, and I think we're going to be resorted to watching it on the computers here.
Okay.
I'll give it a second.
This is the craziest thing I've ever seen happen ever. So
I saw this one.
Commanders Hail Mary to beat the Bears at the end of this game. Tyreek Stevenson just talking to the Bears or the Commanders fans the whole time the play is developing.
And then
he's the one that tips the ball to Noah Brown. If he would have stayed talking shit the whole play, they wouldn't have got the touchdown. He wouldn't have hit the ball as high.
Yeah.
Casey, if we can run that back to just the very start, and you'll see where Tyreek Stevenson's lined up, which makes it 10 times worse. He is the player on the far left that's supposed to be following Noah Brown. He's supposed to be attached to Noah Brown the entire time, and his back is turned to the play to talk crap to Commanders fans and let them score a touchdown. He runs into the swarm late, tips the ball up right into Noah Brown's hands.
Could you imagine if Cam Taylor-Britt was doing that?
You have to leave him on the tarmac. You have to leave him on the tarmac.
Has he been good this year?
He's a fine player.
So he won't get cut?
He won't get cut. He's a starting corner.
Like, what do you think that film? Like, I've never been a football player, so I've never seen film or anything like that. What do you think that tape looks like when you're going back with your coach?
I legitimately don't think they'll play that in meetings. I think he will watch that play alone with Eberflus.
Yeah.
That is the worst thing I've ever seen transpire at the end of an NFL football game.
Yeah.
It doesn't get worse than that.
It's pretty bad.
What do you do as the coach? Like, what's the coaching point there?
Like I said, I think the only option
is play football.
You got to cut
I think you
him.
revert back to like your old high school ways, like as you're climbing up through the ranks, and you just light his ass up.
Just make him run.
Yeah, just make him run. We're gonna keep running until the end of practice. I think that's what that one is.
If they don't suspend him or something, that'd be crazy to me because that seems like something you got to at least punish him for a little bit. I mean, that's crazy.
You lost the game. A game that I would love to see what the win probability was. Like, you know how they always have that win probability? I would love to know what that was at that point.
Filibuster.
No, you're fine. I'm glad you can look that up. But 18-15 is the final. And I get, like, you're enjoying that. I mean, it was an ugly game, and you feel like, all right, we escaped with the win. They would have improved to 5-2. Everyone would be talking about the Bears. Well, guess what? We are still talking about the Bears, but for all the wrong reasons. Yes, that is a Hail Mary. It's a 50-50 play. I mean, you're just throwing it up there and just hoping that one of your guys comes down with it. But when you're responsible for why that guy came down with it, I mean, that's a huge problem as far as that's concerned. And you know, 4-3 now are the Bears. And then now the legend of Jaden Daniels continues. And if I'm Caleb Williams, I'm pissed at this too because Caleb Williams didn't have a great game against the Commanders yesterday. He did not. But at the same time, if you're a Bears teammate, if you're a Williams teammate, you know that the whole world is tuning into this game to get an idea of who the better of the two is. And Williams would have won another game potentially not playing one of his better games. Remember how bad he was in week 1? They came out with the win. This would have been another one of those. So now you have helped grow the legend of Jaden Daniels. Your own teammate did. Caleb Williams' own teammate helped grow the legend of Jaden Daniels, and you hurt your own quarterback in Caleb Williams. What was that run or the win probability for the
97.9 following Jaden Daniels' incomplete pass to Zach Ertz on first down.
God.
97.9.
That's tough.
That's 19 seconds left in the football game.
That's tough.
Anyone that had the Bears in a parlay that thought you had that one won? Oh.
I think Reed had a bet on it too.
Yeah, but did it come down to that? Yeah,
it came down to Bears money line.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it stunk.
Yeah, no
stunk real bad.
Fines. But all right, well that wraps it up for us. Thank you everyone for hanging out with us. Give us hit that like on the way out, please. Give the guys a like. Give Casey a like. Give Elliot a like. Give Jacob a like. You don't have to give me a like, but give them a like, okay?
Give Kenner
by
a
all
love.
means. But until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.